Okay, ZBA, we are live, we are recording, phone lines are open, and you're good to go.
Okay, thank you. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the East Hampton Town Zoning Board of Appeals meeting of January 25th. We have 4 hearings this evening. I'm going to turn over the first hearing to my Vice Chair, Ed Johan, as I am going to be recused from that hearing. So Ed, at this point, I will turn this over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tonight, our first hearing is for Tourmalet LLC, and I'll read it in at this point. This is for Tourmalet LLC, 250 Old Montauk Highway, Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map number 300-87-3-4. The lot size is 49,461 square feet. The description is to demolish existing resident improvements and construct a 4,252 square foot, 2-story residence, swimming pool, and approximately 2,312 square feet of first and second story terraces, a gazebo, sanitary system with retaining walls, and to allow a portion of a wooden walkway to the beach to remain on a parcel of land containing coastal bluffs and beaches. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-4-20 and an NRSP, and variances from 255-11-10, which is dimensional regulations of the town code, and any relief necessary. A 1.5-foot variance is required to allow the residence to extend to 26.5 feet above natural grade, where 25 feet is the limit for flat roof structures. All improvements are proposed more than 125 feet from the toe of the bluff. This is an A residence zone, an X flood zone, and the secret class is type 2. And council, do we have a proper notice and posting?
Yes, we do, and the paperwork appears to be in order.
Thank you. So I'll move forward on this. This was my application, and with Brian's help, we'll put up some photos. This is the picture taken yesterday of the notice. We'll start by saying that we did have a hearing on this several months ago. This is a new application, and it required a new sign. Here's the sign, which I got 2 days ago. Next, Brian. This was the previous one. We can skip that. This is from several months ago. Next. Here we are looking. I'm looking west here, down Old Montauk Highway, give you an idea of the character of the road. Most of us are very familiar with it. East, next, please. Here I'm looking east, and you can see that you make your way over a hill as you come down to this driveway. I'm looking east on the highway here. Next. This is looking immediately east at a property that's now under construction, and some of what's going on here will come into play with some future photos. Next. Again, looking down on this project from the driveway about the entry of the Tourmalet project. Next. Just turned and looked across the way to show you the nature of the property here. Looking out across the highway, we can see that there's some vegetation there, and back in behind is a driveway that leads to another residence. Next. Here we are approaching the gateway. There's some work going on in the adjacent property. These properties are co-owned by the same individual. The property we're looking at tonight has got proposed construction. There's construction going on. And so some of the area that's part of this parcel is currently being used by the construction company. Next. Here I am standing just inside the gate looking down. It's important to notice just how precipitous the slope is here. The topography on this piece is particularly challenging. It's very steep, and you can tell from here that I'm standing a good deal above the entry to the building. Next. Just taking a look at the vegetation that's now up on the slope of this property as you come on down. It's fairly mature in places, and it's fairly substantial. Next. This is just, we can skip this one. I'm just working my way down to give you an idea how steep the walkway is. Next, please. As you come down, there's a fork in the walkway, and at one point it slopes more dramatically to the east, and you can see that construction that's happening immediately to the east of this property. Next. Little shed along the way that's been noticed in the TAM, just for that on the survey, you'll see that it exists. Next, little storage shed. This is just to give you an idea. That patio that's on the right of the photo is associated with the Tourmalet piece and at 250. And you can see how close the excavation has come for the property immediately adjacent to it. So this will give you an idea of some of what we're going to see happening in the future. Next. Just again, that's down that, I'm on that patio, give you an idea of its purchase and its view to the ocean. Next. I've turned around and looked back again from that patio. This is a sizable structure taking place next door with a massive excavation. All of this has been pre-approved. This is a project that's underway, but it does give you an idea of the scope of the project and the necessary work that has to be done to work on a site like this. Next. You can skip by that. There's a shot of the work going on two adjacent properties. Here we are working our way away from the house down to, it's noticed in the TAM that we have a wooden walkway. We see the beginnings of it in front of us. There's a few steps coming down and a wooden walkway that then plunges, starts on this property, plunges to the east on the adjacent property, and then returns. Next. I've turned and looked back up at the house. This is the structure to be demolished and replaced, and you get an idea of the size of it, and it sits in a fairly flat spot that's been created for the construction of the home. Next. Here's that walkway, and you can see what's happening, that it's the portion that's immediately in front of you on screen is on property, but as it continues to go to the east, it plunges off of the property on the adjoining piece, and you can see all of this on the survey. Next. There we are a little further down. By the time you get to that gate, we are clearly off of the 250 property. We're past the 250 property line. Next. Now, this is the driveway that we've noticed before in previous conversations, and it's very clear on the survey that there is a driveway that services the house at 216 Old Montauk Highway that cuts through this parcel. And that'll be more obvious in a minute. But here's a section of it from that lower area. As I'm working my way down to the beach, I can see it sweeping down, plunging down towards a house that has been in front of the board in the past, we're familiar with, but that one sits much closer to the ocean. Next. I'm turning myself around, looking back up at the house. Again, you can see basically here you get an idea just how sharply the ground falls off. This is a steep slope from the highway straight down to the road with only a small flat up there where the construction vehicles were parked. This is a very precipitous slope. Next. I'm looking my way back up again. You get an idea how it is like. The property here has been pretty much opened up right up to the property line by the adjacent work going on. Next. Again, now I've turned and looked my way down, give you an idea of the relationship of the property to the ocean. There's a proposed easement here offered by the applicant, and the easement would begin roughly where I'm standing and cover that ground, all of that vegetation that we see working its way down towards the ocean. Next. Back up at the house, just give you an idea of just the size of the house and the scope of how it sits on the land. Next. Because there's a need for retention, there's a number of stone walls, stone little revetments along the property. There's some concrete poured to the right that you can see in this. And there are a number of places where there's a serious amount of 6x6 walls that retain what exists now. Next. This is a pool that be demolished, and this pool sits off to the east, to the west of the residence. Next. Just to look back at it, the pool was carved into the side hill, and you can see immediately behind these chaise lounges that the slope of the landmass here moved very rapidly back up towards the road. Next. Now I'm standing on the glass rail that's part of the pool enclosure, and I'm looking down on the driveway we referenced in an earlier photo. That driveway sweeps very close to inside where this pool exists and where the proposed pool will go. This was something in conversation in a previous hearing that we'll discuss again tonight. This is a serpentine driveway that starts on Montauk Highway and works its way all the way down to 216, cutting through this parcel at this portion. Next. Again, I've just turned in the other direction to show you what's going on with that. That driveway is beneath my right arm here, but then continues down and sweeps to the ocean. Next. Looking back at the house, now I'm looking at the west side of the house, and this is the house to be demolished. Next. Again, we can skip that. Next. I worked my way back up now, and I'm looking down at the house. This is a little closer view of what the front entry is like. I'm about halfway down. Again, I'm working my way back up to the roadway. Next.
I believe that's the last one.
That's it? Okay, thank you very much. Do we have any questions for me or about that presentation from any of the board members before we move on? No? Nobody has any questions? Okay, can we go to the representative for the applicant here?
Good evening, Zoning Board of Appeals. Just making sure I'm unmuted. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Good evening, Andy Hammer. I'm here with Joel Halsey and wanted to say Happy New Year to the board. I think this is the first time I've appeared before the board in the new year, and I'm also happy to see Denise Savarese as a member of the board. She's great institutional knowledge and procedural history on the zoning board, and despite being her young age, don't let it fool you. She's really, she has a lot of institutional knowledge here. I'm here tonight representing Tourmalet, the owner of 250 Old Montauk Highway. I think the adjacent property, just for the board's information, that was approved in 2018 as the Platite application. So that work that's being conducted was approved by the board and under that name. Just if there's any questions about it, it obviously the sites share almost identical topography. So the contractor who is working on that site is also going to be the contractor on this site. Yeah, most likely. So, you know, obviously there's been a lot of knowledge learned in terms of working on it. This feels a little bit like deja vu to myself and maybe some members of the board, as this project was reviewed in October. Reasons outside of our discussion, we withdrew it and we could complete our file and record with our submissions tonight. I have no problem or objection to incorporating the record from the October 5th hearing into tonight's public hearing. I think the board did a pretty extensive discussion, as well as our presentation of the property and the project, as well as some of the issues. And I think we could, you know, we participated with the board in answering some of those. I'm hoping we can just answer additional questions you might have tonight as well. I also want to point out that Vinnie Gaudiello from the Raynor Group is on the has called into the meeting. Christian Bollinger, I believe, who's the architect of record, has also called in. Walter Lorenz from Hobbs Construction, who is the contractor, as well as Jeff Valentino from Hollander Design, who's the landscape architect. They're all standing by and might be able to answer more specific questions. As an overview, I wanted to draw the board's attention to some of the revised plans that were submitted for the application that depicts a basement egress. That was one of the items that was discussed by the board, and I think John Whalen at the time, or Whelan, and it was corrected in our submission, as well as a revised drawing showing the structure's compliance with pyramid regulations. And I think that was accomplished by showing a slight jog in the roof line that took us away from, you know, the closest proximity to the pyramid line, so that we wouldn't be close. One other thing I did want to mention is we have a request for a height variance, which was necessitated from our height from finished grade elevation, not from natural grade under our town code. This was kind of requested as a boots and suspenders suggestion by the building department or the building inspector. We do actually comply with height limitations under our town code from natural grade, but we wanted to remove any ambiguity about the code's measurement in this application, and that's why we requested it. Most importantly, perhaps, I did want to call the board's attention to a revised construction protocol that was submitted, and that is why Vinny Gaudiello is on the line. Perhaps you can speak to this in more detail if you have questions. But it does provide for an important aspect that we discussed at length in the October hearing: construction monitoring for vibration, on adjacent properties, as well as a pre-construction survey of surrounding residences within 200 feet that we would be happy to conduct. Obviously, we need the cooperation of the adjacent owners. That would provide the opportunity to establish any potential for construction impacts that can be addressed in real time. And I think that's, elaborated on in the construction protocol that's in front of the board. I also wanted to show that there were the revised survey that was submitted incorporates a few minor changes to retaining walls. Those were required by the health department permit to allow for access for maintenance to the sanitary system, which is proposed to be located on the south side of the residence. Basically, one retaining wall was pulled back from a property line to allow effective. That's on the west side. There was a small change to the retaining wall, as well as on the east side to accommodate effective access, to the sanitary so that it can be properly serviced. Other than that, I would make myself and any of the other professionals that are online available to answer any questions you may have, and hope we can focus our discussion to answering any questions.
Thank you, Andy. Listen, is there any board member who'd like to make a comment first to begin here? Ask any questions? No. Nobody going to speak up?
No, I was concerned about the height extension, but Andy just went through that. The height variance. I was concerned about that. I do not. What's the latest survey? The one in the packet goes back to 2017. Is it
January 6, 2022, I believe, is the survey record.
Old. Okay.
Yes, that's it.
Got it, Terry?
Yeah, for now.
Okay, anyone else want to say anything? I have a couple of comments, so wait to see if other board members have something to say.
Not from me. Go ahead, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you. So when we had our last hearing, we spent some time discussing protocol here, particularly in reference to the two adjacent properties. One is 242 and 246, 242 being down closer to the ocean and 246 being the one that's immediately to the northwest. This was great concern for all of us, and we talked about it at length, mostly because we were concerned about the stability of the soil and the land around both the property, particularly to the northwest, and then what would happen to the access driveway for 242. In other words, there'll be a serious amount of construction. At that time, I know we were told that there would be not a problem accessing this from the highway in the north and pulling back towards the center of the property, any materials or debris, and having them exit the property. Still, at that time, I remember saying that, the idea that pool would come out nice and neatly without having to worry about it tumbling down, blocking the driveway, doing any potential damage to it. I understand that it's on the property of the parcel owner, but nonetheless, even for emergency services, it has to be laid clear. And the other problem was at the house to the northwest, with the amount of vibration that would happen and the amount of potential for sloping of that slope and what we would be up against here in the long term. I feel that one of the things I'm happy about reading in the new protocol is that we did address some of that in the protocol, meaning that we talked about relative vibration and came up with this H-frame with photos that I know that Mr. Halsey dropped off to give us an idea of just how you're going to retain that. I would say that property like this is, it's extremely sensitive to us and all of on the old highway. So these are real concerns. And I think that the fact that they're offered in the protocol is a very positive thing. But I would just assert that the board will always be interested to see that this is maintained and that the absolute maximum can be done to protect the interest of the adjoining neighbors here. I think this is particularly important. And I had a question about the Fuji clean vent system, and that is that I looked at the sketch on that, and I know it relies on electric for it to work. I don't see it tied into a generating system, and you're going to have town water. That'll require some sort of backup electric. Can somebody on Andy, on your end, comment on that?
Yeah, I think probably the best person to comment on that sanitary as well as the protocol is Vinny Gaudiello, who should be on hold, and I believe the last 4 digits of his phone number will be 4600. If they could, I would hand the floor over to him to answer that question.
I do have that number in the waiting room. Would you like me to unmute them?
Yes. Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
Okay, stand by, please. Unmuting last 4 digits, 4600.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Vincent Gaudiello, and I'm a principal with the Rayner Group, and just wanted to confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, we can hear you. Mr. Gaudiello, are you an attorney?
I am not.
So will you please raise your right hand and repeat after me? Or not repeat after me, I'm sorry, just affirm. Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Do we have, for council, do we have a proper address for you, Mr. Gaudiello?
Do we have a proper?
Address for Mr. Gaudiello?
I do.
You do? Okay, thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, members of the board. Again, my name is Vincent Gaudiello. I'm a professional engineer and principal with the Rayner Group, and we are been retained by the applicant to prepare in essence, the civil engineering aspects of this project as well as the construction protocol. I believe the question raised had to do with the sanitary system and the fact that the system or the treatment tank itself relies on electric power to operate. With respect to that system, should the power fail, the system is designed in essence to flow by gravity. So in essence, what you would be having is a system that would similarly work like in a conventional system. And that the primary treatment still would remain within the treatment tank, just that the waste treatment process in essence would be bypassed or more or less flow through gravity through the tank.
The section on the drawing I looked at didn't seem to indicate that. So you're saying that whatever came into that tank, holding tank area, would then just move immediately on out into the distribution tank. That's correct? That's it?
Yes.
So
If you
go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
If you look at that sanitary system profile, which is on sheet C1,
Yes.
and you look at all those pipe invert elevations, you will see that there is what I would say a negative slope from the house into the in essence leaching structure.
Right.
And Caesar, should we show that C1 on the screen so that anyone else can see it? Everyone can see it?
That's going to take me a second to get up, but I'll do it.
There it is.
You want the upper view here or the up?
Yeah, if you go to the right side of the page, just above the title block, that's where it exists.
So this is the invert elevations and the slope to the...
Exactly. Exactly. And everything that in essence is shown in plan view is represented with respect to that section view, in essence to grade, where your piping is, where your clean outs are, where the treatment tank is, et cetera.
So at this point, if there was a power failure and having town water, they can continue to function, toilets would flow, sinks would work, but the system would then no longer work as designed, but it would continue to function safely in moving waste out into the holding tank. Is that right? That's what you're saying?
Correct. Correct.
Yeah. So,
And
in the
again,
case
if I just may interject, it is designed in accordance with the standards of the Suffolk County Department of Health Services, and no prerequisite is required by the health department for emergency standby power with respect to proposing such a system.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. My concern was that we've seen lift stations, which I know this is not one, back up when town water can continue to flow into them and they don't have any capacity to empty. And that happens during hurricanes and power outages.
Yeah, no, listen, I think your question is a very valid one, and it's something that should always be concerned when you're, in essence, ultimately required to lift waste in order to make the system work.
Correctly. Yeah, thank you. Anyone else want anything on this from the board or any related question before I ask something else? Mr. Gurriello, while we still have you, the real concern that came up on my behalf last time was one of the concerns was about the retention at the house to the northwest. I've seen the sketch now, and I've, I've what your section here on between pages 15 and 17 on the protocol pretty thoroughly describe the effort that's planned to be made to, one, retain any material there, and then keep the vibration to a minimum as we move forward and relative to the houses there. The extent to which this wall is to be built or this retention is to be put in place to protect the house to the northwest, your feeling is that we don't have to worry about it any further north because we're going to get up to a fairly relative height. And as we come down south, this is going to protect us as we get down to where the existing pool is now and through there. I'm looking at the drawing as it's in front of us, and I know where you're intending it. My concern was just to make sure that we know that that house to the northwest can be fully protected by the effort that you're making here to retain this soil.
Absolutely. If I may, and not to be long-winded, I know you guys have a long evening here, but to just kind of give you the gist of how we proceed is, before we start anything here, we would go and we would survey each one of these residents within within 200 feet of the site. And what I mean by that is we would go to their foundations, we would go into the interior of their basements. Obviously, some permission from them would be required, but to assess, in essence, what exists and what those existing conditions are. And then in the process of driving the support of excavation that would be needed to build these retaining walls, and just to kind of give a board some feedback here, the retaining walls that were previously proposed in the prior design have been pushed off the property line a minimum of 5 feet. And what that 5 feet allows for us to do is to install this supportive excavation. While that supportive excavation is being installed, we propose to put a monitor independent to myself out there on site to, in essence, take readings at these structures. And what I mean by that is that these readings would be taken pretty much at the face of the foundation of these adjacent properties. So, part of what we're proposing here would require us to, enter onto these properties and make sure that we're not impacting them. And what conditions the board would impose of us in conducting that, or what would need to be worked out with these residents, I think that the applicant, and I'm speaking on behalf of them, would be more than amenable to what the board felt was necessary.
And then one other last question on that, and we'll let you go on this issue, and that is that idea of retaining the material that's down where the existing pool is now, that is immediately above the access driveway. Is that to merely be pulled back? And maybe it's more of a construction question than a question for you, to be pulled back. My concern is that there is a 6x6 wall retaining all of that. When that wall comes out, there's a great deal of material above, and somehow some sort of protection's got to be in place to keep from a great deal of construction material winding up on that driveway. And obviously there'll be some work being done. You know what I'm saying, though. This is a fair amount.
You know, what's proposed in the protocol report, we also provide a sequence of construction. And the sequence of construction with this project is we set up our erosion and control measures. Then we go and we're going to do the bulk of the demolition. We're going to take the house down. We're going to take the pool out. Obviously, structures that are there that serve retention and hold back on the slope, they're not going to be touched until it's ultimately necessary that that area be further constructed. Beyond the demolition work, the next thing we're doing is installing our sanitary system. And the primary reason for that is, number one, because of the limited space we have, we are going to look to utilize the area where the old pool was, as well as where the old house was, to stage equipment, stage material, and install our sanitary system. Our leaching structures for our sanitary system, in essence, are going pretty much in the same location where the old sanitary system is. So we're abandoning the old, we're putting in a new, and in essence, that's really the first improvement that we are proposing here with this project, and that's identified in the construction protocol report.
Yes. Okay, I wanted to hear you say it. Thank you. Any questions from other board members?
I just have a question there, not a technical question, looking for some guidance. The description that Mr. Gordiello just gave us, is that the photo that Joel had sent us as a sample of the retaining walls?
Yeah. No,
Yes?
that's
Okay.
a temporary. That's a photo of a typical H pile and lagging system. That's what's going to be used as the temporary means of holding back the neighbor's property.
Right, okay. Yes, thank you.
Anyone else? Other board members?
Is there a facility in the plan for some reporting to this board and to the planning department at certain intervals in this project? I'm looking at the timeline. Is that something that we think might be necessary?
I think in the protocol, well, we'll let them speak for themselves. I read what was in the protocol about controlling.
Yeah. Within section 2.4.4.1, we talk about the vibration monitoring and with respect to the installation of the supportive excavation. And in there, we identify, in essence, who we propose to have do the work, and in a nutshell, it would need to be an entity acceptable to the town of East Hampton. We do provide some criteria in there as far as the vibration monitoring and levels that we would look to maintain, which is right out of the Army Corps of Engineer handbook. And in essence, we're basically, what we're proposing here, we need to still provide to the town the entity who would be doing that monitoring and have that be acceptable to the town.
Okay, all right, thank you. Excuse me?
Is there someone else before we go on to the planning department? Anyone have a comment on the behalf of the board? Okay, if not, let's go to Brian Frank and Brian, are you there?
Yes, I am here, Mr. Chairman.
Brian, can we swear you in? Do you swear or affirm that you tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Brian Frank on behalf of the Planning Department. Just a brief review of what we've been discussing tonight. This is a property that's on the south side of Old Montauk Highway. This is the area of town where setbacks and lot area are measured from the base of the bluff instead of the crest of the bluff. Because as is the case in this area, in many places, there is either no distinct bluff crest or it's all the way really at the south side of Old Montauk Highway. Many of these properties are improved. An increasing number have been redeveloped of late, and this is an example of the latter. You can see in this aerial the two properties under construction that were referenced by member Johan in his presentation. Immediately to the east of the Tourmalet property is Pla de Te, which does have the same principal in the LLC as the owner of Tourmalet, so there is some control between these two properties. And 2 lots over to the east is a property that was a vacant property that was approved by most recently under the name of Drucker and McCombs, and that's under construction as well. To the southwest is 242 Old Montauk Highway, which is an improved property that was approved for redevelopment a number of years ago, and that construction has recently been completed. As has been pointed out, 242 is serviced by this serpentine driveway that meanders onto the subject property and adds to some of the site constraints. This project was the subject of a public hearing in the fall. It is worth noting that that hearing was also a Zoom hearing and was interrupted by both a power failure and then a subsequent lag in getting internet connectivity back, which definitely kind of broke the flow of the hearing. We did have a member of the public who had attempted to call in during this application that didn't get in until after the board had moved on to one of the subsequent hearings, and it kind of added to a lack of flow or continuity might be a better word. But in that previous hearing, as well as this application, there is a fairly high level of environmental protection for the natural feature itself, which is the coastal bluff face. There is a scenic easement that's been proposed roughly 190 feet south of the northern property line that brings it in line to the scenic easement on the two adjoining properties to the east. It's worth noting, and member Johan, didn't allude to it. He directly pointed to it in his presentation. The adjoining properties to the east both have substantial improvements under construction. Both required a significant amount of earth movement, but they're much more regularly shaped. They're rectangular from the highway down to the ocean, and that reduces the extent of constraints that we have at the Tourmalet property. At the previous hearing, we had discussed the constraints posed both by the driveway to the south of the pool, which is in very close proximity to the pool. Again, members, Johan's photographs show that pretty clearly. And the adjoining property to the west or the northwest, the improvements are fairly close to the property line, about 20 feet away. There is a significant change in elevation from the highway down to where the building envelope is. It's about 110 feet at the entrance to the driveway, maybe a little bit higher. And the area where the house is proposed is anywhere between 85 feet and 90 feet above sea level, depending on exactly where you want to measure it. So there is a lot to be considered here, both in terms of the demolition of the existing improvements and the removal of the various retention structures, whether those are concrete walls, 6x6s, either dry stacked or mortared round stone on some of the slopes there, the stabilization of those areas, and the construction of those improvements without disturbing the adjoining properties. And that's really more of a matter that's not something that the zoning board gets into very often. But I think it's fair to say that concern for that is addressed in both the purposes of zoning and the general special permit standards, which talk about compatibility and the protection of neighborhoods and a bunch of other general parameters that I don't think it warrants belaboring here, except to say that the end result was to solicit from the applicant a more detailed construction protocol about how the existing improvements would be removed and the new improvements would be constructed without adversely impacting the neighboring properties or impeding the sole access to 242. That construction protocol is a part of this file. You've heard Mr. Gaudiello address that. He was actually speaking during the hearing in the fall when we did lose power, and he's obviously had a chance to both complete that presentation as well as get into a little bit more detail as requested by the board. There is the matter of this walkway that replaced an unimproved path that had been on the property for years. And as we discussed in the prior application, really a small amount of it is on the Tourmalet property. Most of it is on the Pla d'Ete property. I've spoken to Joel about how my suggestion about how that should be handled. I can add it to the record here if you think it's pertinent, but it's definitely at least a secondary issue to some of the safety and stability issues that have been the principal focus of this review. There is a challenge with regard to the mechanics of incorporating a construction protocol into a zoning board determination and making sure they're adhered to. In this case, this is not a protocol that was prepared. You can make a case that in some applications, a protocol has been prepared to kind of check a box. Here, it's necessary for both safety and effectiveness to have a certain measure of following it. But how that gets effectuated within the context of a zoning board approval, I'm still not exactly sure how to do that. As the applicant has proposed, they have proposed independent vibration monitor by a third party. And the mechanism for selecting that and making sure that that's adhered to is something that the board should consider discussion in its deliberation of the application once the record closes. From an environmental protection standpoint, I don't really have a lot to add. The sediment control that's been proposed is at the very least standard. It's actually a little bit belt and suspenders. It's proposing both the wire reinforced silt mesh fencing as well as the staked straw bales. Both of those together are often not required, but considering the volume of material that's upslope of the sediment control, that in conjunction with the support that's added by the safety fencing, the 4-foot safety fencing, this is probably a good spot for belt and suspenders. Beyond that, I'd like to make myself available for any questions that the board members have, or to bring anything else up from the file that the board members want on the screen. I do have the building plans here if you want to see the elevations, just to share that or have an opportunity to take a look at that and ask comments of the applicant while we're in the venue of the public hearing, and obviously anything else that's within the file.
Thank you, Brian. Any comments from board members? Questions for Brian?
Well, I know he said it's secondary, but maybe Brian, in a minute or less, you could discuss the walkway.
Sure, I will. The walkway, I had been on this path when it was an unimproved path. In general, it's the planning department's recommendation that structures be used when safe pedestrian access can't be accomplished without a structure. This board has seen steeply sloped properties on Fort Pond Bay and Hedges Banks where it's unreasonable to ask a property owner to get from the top of the bank down to the beach without a staircase safely. I think that while there may not be a glaring environmental impact from a structure like this, if the zoning board approves this structure, mostly on Pla d'Ete, then I think you can expect the other properties in this section of Old Montauk Highway to request them as well. And the cumulative effect of them is going to have an effect on the character of the neighborhood. My suggestion is if it can't be removed in its entirety, the sections that are necessary, there are some staircases within the staircase that may warrant it's retention, where the slopes are steepest, and where constant use or more frequent use of a footpath might create a little gullying and erosion that both runs off a little bit and is less safe. But as a whole, I don't know that the full length of this structure is the best candidate for a natural resource special permit.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, if most of what you're pointing out is on plotted A, how is that in our purview at this moment?
I don't know that it really is, except that I don't know that it really is. This part of the structure, really doesn't do much without the rest of it. The part that's on Tourmalet really doesn't have much utility without the rest of it, and I guess that's the main reason for bringing it up in the context of the Tourmalet application.
But if the recommendation is to remove certain portions of it, is any of that going to be applicable to Tourmalet?
Well, this might be one of the area that does have some of the steepness to it, and I think I'd have to both revisit this in my own site photos and maybe even go back to it, or the board members are certainly able to do that while the record is open.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Anyone else on the board? Comments, questions for Brian? No?
No.
I'm not hearing from anyone. Okay. Do we have anyone in the public waiting to be heard on this?
We do have a few callers. I will let them in order. It's going to be, first one is ending in 0620. And caller, you are live. Okay, I'm going to go on to the next one. 6006.
6006, this is Walter Lorenz from Hobbs Construction.
Okay, we're looking now for public comments. Thank you, Walter.
Okay, I'm going to try this one that does not have a name to it. 7623. Caller ending in 7623. You are live.
I believe that caller is Christian Bollinger, the architect of record. I recognize the number, have them written down. So I'm not sure if he's in a bad cell area, but that's who that caller is.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have a Jonathan Perlman. I don't know if he's part of this application.
I don't know either.
Okay. So I'm going to unmute last four digits of 8958.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Mr. Perlman, are you here for the Tourmalet hearing?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you please tell me if you're an attorney or not?
I'm not an attorney.
Can you please state your full name and address for the record?
Yeah, my name is Jonathan Perlman, and I'm a resident of 246 Old Montauk Highway.
Thank you, Mr. Perlman. I'll have to swear you in since you're not an attorney. Would you please raise your hand? Do you swear or affirm to tell the
Yes.
truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Yes?
Yes,
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
thank you. I'm calling in as a resident of 246 Old Montauk Highway, which is the house directly to the northwest of 250 Old Montauk Highway, to express my deep concerns about the proposed project as it's been proposed and how it will impact our property. Our home, as you've presented, being directly to the northwest is particularly vulnerable to erosion and losing the continuity that keeps us in place. Currently on the 250 Old Montauk Highway property, there are many retention walls in place, stones to retain the incline, vegetation to maintain the slope, and the prior construction has been carved into the hill, all of which would be removed if the proposed plan goes through, and which could result in massive soil erosion. As it stands, this is a major and aggressive project that would have a dramatic impact on what's there. This is a sensitive area due to the steep grade and severe changes in elevation, which Brian Frank pointed out very, very clearly. The collateral damage could be huge to our property if this project is given the go-ahead as it stands. It has been established that the construction methods of the 250 Old Montauk Highway will likely be very similar to those employed by 254 Old Montauk Highway, which is owned by the same person as 250, and it's east, it's further east, so 254 is further away from us. However, during the construction of 254 Old Montauk Highway over the last 2 years, we have experienced huge tremors at our property from the extreme foundation work. During the work on the hillside of 254, our entire house was shaking violently for consistent periods that lasted from 8 a.m. until the evening, unbelievably causing our outdoor glass tabletops to shatter. The proposed residence at 250 Old Montauk Highway is even closer to us, only 20 feet from our property line, much closer than 254, and therefore we would anticipate that these vibrations, given that they're going to be using very similar construction methods, would be even greater, which is crazy to even imagine. We are very concerned about how vulnerable our property is and the impact to us if the topography of the hillside is further restructured and more of these invasive and aggressive building techniques are employed. The stability of the slope will surely be compromised, and it must be kept in mind that this is an ecologically delicate site. We have been residents of Montauk since the 1960s, and we thank you very much in advance for your consideration of our concerns.
Ed, you're muted.
I'm sorry. But thank you very much for your comment. Board members, does anybody want to make a comment about that comment? Anybody have any questions to ask here? I might have one, and that would be to go back and ask maybe Mr. Gardello, maybe perhaps ask of Hobbs, what was done on 254 that would have made it so potentially damaging to the work that was we just heard from this the caller, and how is that going to be different on the new property? Now, we just had an explanation of the protocol. I don't think we have to go through that. My question would be, what went on the other project that allowed for so much vibration so far away? Is there some way in which we're going to be comforted in the fact that this is going to be done with a different technique and a more gentle approach? Can we get a comment from you, Andy, on that, or from your team?
I would suggest that either Vinny or Hobbs would be better suited to answer that question. But I certainly do think that the neighbors' concerns are something that we took very seriously in preparing that construction protocol, as well as the vibration monitoring. We specifically wanted to prevent any type of impact. So, I think there's obviously a newfound, or maybe not a newfound, but it's certainly a respect for any potential for adverse impacts that we are planning for in advance, so that we can monitor and address before in real time before they occur. But other than that, I would probably suggest Vinny or Walter could address that perhaps more effectively than I can. What are the two numbers?
Mr. Gardello there?
Yeah, I think this is Walter Lorenz from Hobbs. I'd be happy to address that.
Walter, before you do, are you an attorney? Excuse me, are you an attorney?
No.
Walter? Okay, so we have to be sworn in. Can you raise your hand, please? Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. I think the question, Mr. Lorenz, was...
To the concern of excessive vibration from the 254, for 250, we're going to, there's a few things that come into play. One is the SOE, the supportive excavation wall between the two properties, is going to stay in place. So there's no added vibration from driving those piles that are on the property line. Second, the piles that we're driving for 250 don't have the same depth that they had for 254, so there'll be less driving time for those piles. And then third, what we're going to do, the method that we're going to utilize for 250 is to pre-drill with an auger all of the locations where the piles go, so that the soil will be loose and will be much easier to sink the H piles into the subsurface without going through just compacted soil. So we think those three things combined are going to have a very different approach and feel than what took place at 254.
So none of the retention pilings going in will be driven. You'll put them in an augered hole and then backfill, and that's how they're going to be placed?
Well, no, they will be driven, but they're going to be driven through disturbed soil.
Okay.
So there's much less vibration, if any.
Thank you. Any follow-up question from any other member of the board before we move on? No? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Lorenz. Do we have anyone else, Matt, waiting?
We do have one more caller, and I will let them in right now. Last four digits, 3477.
Excuse me. Hi, it's John Tarbett, and I do represent Jonathan Perlman, who spoke a little while ago as the Northwest resident.
And you are an attorney, Mr. Tarbett.
I am. Thank you. Yeah, I am. So I don't want to take up too much of the board's time. I'll submit some comments in writing after the hearing. I did want to just say that there are a lot of experts on the outside who are very good at what they do, and also listening to the board tonight and Brian Frank speak, it's clear that you're taking it very serious. I do think it's an unusual application where my client's house is 40 feet from, not the property line, the actual house is 40 feet from where these piles are going to be driven. And we know that 100 feet away or 100 and something feet away, there's enough vibration to cause a glass table to break on our client's property. So this is definitely a legitimate concern. And I do think that the applicant has come a long way towards addressing that concern. I just think that just because maybe none of us have dealt with this specifically in the form of a zoning board hearing before, there's some devil in the details. And that is, it's great and it's appropriate, and it's how it's done in a situation like this, to have an independent third party monitor the vibration. But how does that get effectuated in the field? So say the independent third party, and I see that in the construction protocol that should be approved by the town, and I would just ask that that be somebody that is approvable by the planning department. And then if that person who's on site, who should be on site during any pile driving, I don't think they have the authority as a non-town employee to stop construction. So it would be great if in the zoning board decision, if this were to be approved, there'd be some sort of mechanism where the building inspector would be notified, and the building inspector, by virtue of the decision, would know that a stop work order should be issued if the independent third party believes that the vibration has reached a level that is likely to damage my client's house. Also, that's when the piles are being driven, but also important is that this is done. It's not an unusual situation in other country where construction like this is done. There should be a remote. That same third party should have a remote monitoring system in place so that during other periods of construction, again, after the piles are driven, clearly they don't have to have someone on site all the time, but there should be a remote sensor which could alert them if some other construction activity is causing a vibration level that could damage my client's house. How that gets written into the decision, I don't know, but I would just hope and I trust that the applicant's agent and Brian from the planning department, I'm sure this can be worked out. I just hope that it doesn't get lost in the decision as we move forward. Again, I'll submit some regarding. I had asked in the October letter to the board. I'd asked for some more information on pyramid and spot elevations for height. I had an application a couple of years ago on 58 Napeag where the board had requested that we go back and get more spot elevations. Similarly, in that application, we had one or two that we were using to draw our heights and pyramids from. And when we went back at the board's request, we did find that by taking additional spot elevations, we had to redesign our roof and our house to meet the height recommendations. I don't see those here. I could have missed them. I'll go through it more carefully, but I will submit those comments in writing. I just don't think there's enough spot elevations on what was submitted. And that's my big concern tonight. Was just hoping that if this were approved, that somehow the decision work out the details to protect the client's house. Because I have been involved in cases where construction activity on one property undermined another, and once it happens, there's no retreating, right? So if this property were undermined or foundation cracked to make it unsafe, that becomes a real mess. And so you can't put it back in the bag. And I thank you for the time.
Well, thank you, Mr. Tarbert. I think that the effort that's being made by the board here to review this is an indication of how seriously we take your concerns, and we'll continue to look at that as this moves forward. Do we have anybody else waiting to be heard, Matt?
You have 0 additional callers. Thank you.
If there's no other comments,
may I make a comment, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please. Who is it? Who's
This is Vin Gaudiello from the Rayner Group.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Mr. Gaudiello.
I just wanted to point out something that's in the protocol report, and it identifies the equipment that we would be proposing to use in monitoring the vibration. And part of that has to do with the software that is out there now with the equipment that you're using, the geofoam, the seismograph, where this data, in essence, is recorded and basically has a report and an analysis of what that day occurred, what happened through the course of that day. And should this board see it fit that on a daily basis that information be submitted to the town or some mechanism for submitting that, I would I think that is the intent of why that material, and that's why that software in essence was created for situations like this. So I just wanted to point that out to the board.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gaudiello.
Okay, Mr. Gaudiello, does that have the capability of the remote immediate contact if it detects something, or it's simply recording? The question that Mr. Tarbert had asked.
I would need to I need to do a little bit more homework on that. I will be very frank with you. In me sitting down and preparing this, I discussed this with Ronnie Engineering. They're a firm in Nassau County who basically does a lot of this monitoring work. Some of the jargon that's in my report really comes from what their experience have been with county projects where they were hired to do this vibration monitoring. So, maybe it's something that, if there is a remote reader that can be placed somewhere, we can do that,
Okay, so
But,
you'll
but,
check
I
it.
think what Mr. Lorenz pointed out from Hobbs is very critical with respect to what can be done differently here. When you are augering and you are loosening the soils and reducing the soil resistance with respect to driving those piles, that in essence is critical to how you address any issue associated with excessive vibration conditions.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Guardiola. We do have your presentation in the protocol, which I think was fairly thorough. So we'll consider that. And I think that if there were additional information, you know that the written record will remain open, and if anything you could submit in support of your position might be of comfort to everyone involved. It'll help in the decision making.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else here before we close this out? This marathon hearing? No? Okay, then I would like to make a motion. I have to get out the paperwork. Hold on. What I did with it. I'd like to make a motion in the case of Tourmalet LLC, 250 Old Montauk Highway, Montauk, Suffolk County Tax Map 300-87-3-4, to close the public hearing at this time, but to leave the written record open till 2 weeks after the transcript is posted on the town website.
I will second that.
I'll concur then.
I concur.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Vice Chair, for taking care of that for me. We are now going to move to our next hearing, which is Kevin Bishop. Kevin Bishop at 21 Old Stone Highway in Springs, Suffolk Tax Map number 300-063-05-10. The applicant is Kevin Bishop. Size and location is 42,125 square foot total at 21 Old Stone Highway, Springs, 300 Springs. The description: to construct an 8 square foot generator and to allow approximately 60 linear feet of existing slate walkways, approximately 100 linear feet of stone walls, an 80 square foot brick patio, 2 90 square foot gravel areas with flower boxes, approximately 250 linear feet of fencing with a gate, and a 9 square foot piece of artwork to remain on a parcel that contains tidal wetlands. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-440, and 11 variances in total are required. 7 variances from 255-430, wetland setbacks, variances of 90 foot, 89 foot, 87.3 feet, 85 feet, 84 feet, 84 feet, and 69.4 feet are required to allow existing slate walkways 10 foot, existing stone walls 11 foot, a proposed generator 12.7 feet, existing fencing 15 feet, an existing brick patio 16 feet, 2 existing gravel areas with flower boxes 16 feet, and an existing art structure 30.6 feet where a 100-foot setback is required. 4 variances from 255-11, 74A. Other setbacks and height restrictions, scenic easement setbacks are required. Variances 10 foot, 3 foot, 8 foot, and 8 foot are required to allow an existing stone wall 0 foot, an existing brick patio 7 foot, 2 existing gravel areas and with flower boxes 2 foot, and an existing slate walkway 2 foot where 10 foot is required, and any other relief necessary from East Hampton Town Code. Zoning district is A5 residence, AE flood zone, elevation 6 foot, X flood zone. Secret class is type 2. And I believe Denise, this is in your area. Do you have a report for us?
Yes, I do.
Council, do we have an affidavit of service and posting?
Yes, we do, and the paperwork appears to be in order.
Thank you. Go ahead, Denise.
Okay, thank you, Eleni. This is the official notice. Next. This is a picture of the residence that I wanted you to see. This is the gravel driveway as you enter the property. These are the all the slate walkways on this property need a wetland setback and scenic easement setback. And this is the slate walkway facing northeast that extends to the rear of the property as well. Next, please. This is showing you the continuation of that same walkway. Next, please. This is the Arbor and Fencing, which I believe is 6 feet high. All of the fencing, it needs a wetland setback, I believe. Yes, it does. Okay. Next, please. Again, the fencing and arbor. Oh, and I do want to make a note. This fencing is on the front yard and it is 6 feet high. Next, please. This is the art structure, which is in need of a wetland setback variance. Next, please. This is facing east. The walkway ends to the rear of the property. And again, this needs a wetland setback and scenic easement setbacks. Next, please. This is a stream that exists directly to the right of the walkway I just showed you. Next, please. This is the facing east walkway, extends to the rear of the property. Next. This is where the units, I originally thought this is where the ARB proposed to put the generator, but I believe now that's been corrected, and this is where they put the AC units, which are facing east, and they're more toward the front of the property. Next, please. This is the proposed location of the generator in the rear of the property. And of course, this needs a wetland setback and scenic easement variance. These are the northeast gravel areas with flower boxes. This needs a wetland setback and scenic easement setback variance. Next, please. This is the same thing. Second gravel pad with flower boxes. Next, please. Northeast walkway extending to the rear of the property. Next. This is the brick patio facing northeast, and that needs a wetland setback and scenic easement variance. Next, please. All right, this is the retaining wall in the southeast facing west. All of the existing stone walls need a wetland setback and scenic easement setback. Next, please. Again, the retaining wall in the scenic easement facing west. Existing stone wall facing south. Again, all of these stone walls need wetland setbacks and scenic easement setback variances. Next. Just another example of the same stone wall and slate walkway. Next. This is a path to Accabonac through a scenic easement, but it is indicated on the survey. Next. And this is the second story deck in the rear of the property. I believe that's it. Next, please. I think that's it, Eleni. Thank you.
Thank you, Denise. And board members, any questions for Denise?
No.
No.
Okay, do we have the applicant here?
Yes, we do.
Can you please state your name and address?
My name's Kevin Bishop of 21 Old Stone Highway, East Hampton, New York, 11937.
Thank you. You want to go ahead, please?
Do I need to be sworn in, as I'm not an attorney?
Yes, I'm the apologize. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
So Roy already covered everything on this first page with his introduction. I've just got a short presentation that takes each of the variances in turn in the sequence which Eleni documented everything in her technical report. I had not planned to do any of this work. Unfortunately, I had a fire in my house in 2018. That's all currently under investigation with the insurance people, but appears to have been caused by PSEG putting 250 volts down the neutral line into the property, which started a fire whilst I was away. all of the work that came has become as a result of fixing that damage. We've done all of the building work and had all the approvals for the building work, but I did my own renovation in the garden, not appreciating that I needed to apply for these permits. My apologies for that. We omitted one key item from that building work, which was to include a generator for the septic system. Hence coming first to the ARB, didn't realise that was the wrong sequence, but first to the ARB regarding the generator and its location, which they approved some time ago, and then now for the Natural Resources Special Permit, and for all of the variances for the gardening work that I did to remain in place. Somebody previously showed a plot of the full property. This is zooming in on the part of the property that is not the scenic easement. About 2/3 of my property is a scenic easement, 1/3 is where the house is, and the whole of the property lies within 100 feet of the wetland, and therefore I now realise that anything that is done there always needs a wetland permit. The 7 wetland variances are labelled on this map to see where you are, and then I've done my own sequence of pictures to illustrate the job. So if we just step through. So we already saw pictures of the existing pathways. They are simple slate laid into the grass in order that I can get from the driveway to the Bilco door and from the front door to the back door of the house without going through the grass and getting wet. Next slide. The stone walls. The small stone walls that you see at the top of this picture were merely to put a visual boundary around that pathway. The important stone wall are the 2 at the bottom of the picture here, which was to prevent the silt and all of the disturbance caused by the installation of the new septic system from flowing down into the wetland. We did a wetland revegetation and planting plan that was put in 2 years ago. That's been approved and inspected and so forth. And this wall is stopping any of the work from the garden going down into that newly planted area. You will note on the survey that when I built the wall, we did it during COVID ourselves, I did a natural curve. I did not have anybody put in flags for where the scenic easement boundary is. The wall, therefore, zigzags across the scenic easement boundary. That was my mistake. If I need to take it down and rebuild it 2 feet, 3 further back, I would be happy to do so, although that would be a lot of work. But clearly, it can't exist at all without a variance to exist on the scenic easement boundary.
Mr. Bishop, if I might stop you there, you made a statement that you did some re-veg or replanting a couple of years ago. Was that a part of your permit requirement?
Yes, it was.
So did you have an NRSP when you did that?
Yes, we did.
Okay, so if you did an NRSP, you would have known the sensitive requirements on this property and what you should or not allowed or should allowed or not allowed to do. Isn't that correct?
I was aware that I needed to do things within the scenic easement, which is where the revegetation part was. I was not aware that I also needed variances that were outside the scenic easement.
Okay, you can go on.
This is the proposed location for the generator that the ARB approved. There was not enough room where the 2 air conditioning units were for the generator. So the ARB recommended that we placed it further back behind the building doors. So this is just a mocked up photograph, cutting and pasting the generator onto the concrete pad. Slightly different view to the one that Denise showed us just now. The generator is required because my septic system doesn't have a, I forget what the correct tank, the holding tank. When the new nitrogen-reducing septic system was installed, we had to take out the 5 cylindrical tanks and replace that with a pressurized drain field system that is a pressurized mat that is higher than the nitrogen-reducing septic system. Therefore, I both have the septic system as a point of failure, but more importantly, there is nowhere to pump out uphill to the pressurized mat drainage field. So if the power goes out, I do have a problem with the septic system. And that was the driver to want to have a generator installed to protect the septic system and also to power the sump pumps in the basement should the power go out. The other items were all decorative pieces of gardening. So the gravel paths are laid around some herb beds. They are laid just on the water permeable matting onto the soil. The brick is just laid onto the water permeable matting onto the soil. They are simple decorative aspects of a yard. The siting of those herb beds and the size of the gravel was designed so that I could disguise very simply with a very thin layer of gravel the access into the new septic system, and that is easily pulled back each time it is maintained, and each time the county comes. I volunteered with the county's program to monitor the success of these septic systems. Each time the county come to do a water test on those sites. So I just mocked up where those two heads are in the gravel in this photograph. The sculpture is from a local artist. Again, it was a decorative piece of garden design, which is, I hadn't appreciated that it was outside the scenic easement, and therefore I needed to have a permit for it because it needed to be further away than it was when I installed it. I believe those are all of the items in place. So the primary technical demand is on a generator to support the septic system and the sump pumps in the event of a power failure. All the others were aesthetic gardening items, which I did not appreciate I needed variances for, and therefore I seek your view on which of these you will approve. And I thank the board members that came to visit to see them all in situ in order that you make your assessment based on the reality of the situation.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Denise, you have questions?
The only question I have is, at the time the IA system was installed, was there any supervision? Did you work with anybody in the town? Because I'm concerned about how the retaining wall ended up in the scenic easement.
There wasn't a requirement to put in a new retaining wall. On the left-hand side of this blue line, there are existing concrete retaining walls, and what had been there previously was just a sloped grass down from the lawn into the wetland. There was no requirement on that to put in a new wall. I did that from an aesthetic point of view, and it was my mistake that I didn't have anybody flag exactly where the line was when I built that. I did it because it was an attractive decorative curve.
In terms of the arbor and the fencing, have you applied to the ARB yet, or?
On those I have not, but I am aware now that anything that is above ground needs to go to that. The building inspectors made me aware of that, and I put the fencing up to try and reduce the amount of deer into that tiny part of my property in order that I could grow fruit and vegetables. If I have to take it down, it is easily taken down. If it's reduced to 4 foot, it doesn't achieve anything for bringing
Well, usually in front yard, it does require to be 4 feet.
I'm aware of that on the front line. I wasn't aware of that if it was set back from the property line. But in which case I will have to garden differently and not grow fruit and veg.
Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
I would clarify that, Denise, that in a front yard, yes, but beyond the front yard setback, it can get reduced or can grow, right? So that's the criteria there.
Yes,
right.
A lot of it there is on the front yard. Thank you, Mr. Bishop. Those are the questions I had.
Mr. Bishop, this is from my point of view, there's a lot of variance requests here. There's a lot of requests. Had you come to us in advance to request these variances, this survey would be looking quite a bit different because we'd be looking for you to relocate in a more, let's say, to reduce the variances more and to protect the wetlands. The town takes that very seriously. So it's difficult for us to take a look at this as a whole and say, that is a blanket approval. I'm curious on how to deal with that in the future. I mean, how to deal with that because the restrictions on this property are extreme. You got wetlands surrounded. Obviously, you have high water table as well. So the environmental impact on this property and these improvements that you did are affecting the wetlands. And part of our requirements is to is to make sure that the wetlands are not reducing to the detriment of the wetlands. So would like you to address that a little bit.
I understand that, Roy.
You did in a sense, but you know, this is difficult for us to take a look at.
So I understand that, Roy. When the building work was done on the house, there was very significant damage to the house. We can find photographs. I don't know if there are aerial photographs of what the landscape was like when they were doing the building work. But essentially, everything inside the silt fence that was required from the building work ended up being just mud. And so I revegetated the mud area with this work. All of the things that I put in, as I say, I did them myself. I hadn't planned to do any work on this. The insurance company didn't cover that part of the work. I didn't use any mortar. I didn't use any materials that are not easily wheelbarrowed away and replaced with turf again, which was what was there before. So I absolutely accept that it was my bad for not coming to you in advance. Lots of revegetation was required because there was nothing there but mud after the building work was finished from the road to where the silt fence was installed whilst the building work was going on.
Okay. Board members, any other questions?
The only thing I want to add, though, you know, because this does concern me, and what Chairman Deline just addressed is really what makes this application very difficult. But we haven't even really talked about the fact that this is in a Springs Historic District. And I find that, you know, the town code does have preservation goals. You're in the middle of the Springs General Store, 1844, 1882 Springs Community Presbyterian Church, 1884 Springs School, Ashwell Hall, the 1886 Charles Parsons Blacksmith Shop, and it just represents many of the facets in the community during the 19th century. And I think that part of the historical district guidelines is to contribute to the overall setting, which is open yards, clearings, traditional fencing along the road, and visual connections between historic buildings and the vistas to Accabonac Harbor. So I'm struggling with this because everything we're talking about tonight did not exist before the fire, correct?
Everything we're talking about tonight did not exist before the fire. All
so
of
the timeline.
The hedging and the fencing to the road and to the cemetery all existed before the fire and have not been disturbed or changed in any way as a result of this.
Okay. I just wanted to get that on record.
Thank you. Board members, any other questions?
No.
Thank you.
No.
Can we go to the planning department at this point? Is that Tyler?
It's me.
Lenny.
Is it Eleni?
It's Eleni.
Hi.
How are you, Eleni? Eleni, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you.
So I just want to start with a clarification that Mr. Bishop didn't have an NRSP prior. He didn't need one because it was for rebuilding for the fire, and that revegetation work was done through the Natural Resources Department, as was the sanitary upgrade. So that could be why he didn't know about some of these other things, so that it wasn't through this process previously.
Thank you.
So that's just a clarification. So just say that, like we know already, the residence was initially constructed prior to the adoption of modern zoning. The parcel is in the Springs Historic District, and the building permit was issued to rebuild in place and kind because of the fire. The property contains a 28,795 square foot scenic easement. So the entire rear portion of the property here is the scenic easement. The residence and clearing are pre-existing, non-conforming to wetland setbacks. The property is located right on Accabonac Harbor. It is within the Accabonac Scenic Area of Statewide Significance. It's located within the Harbor Protection Overlay District and in the Water Protection District. And it's within the Accabonac Harbor Critical Environmental Area and the Accabonac Harbor Critical Natural Resources Area. We know about the proposed generator. It is located in an area that was already approved by the ARB. The existing variances that are requested were noted during this review. And it appears that the need for some of these variances were caused by the voluntary installation of the IA system. The retaining wall is not specifically noted as a sanitary retaining wall because it is located roughly 20 feet from the leaching pools. It does appear to be functioning in a way as a retaining wall. Otherwise, that sediment would be sloping down towards the wetlands. But the planning department does recommend that the board consider the number and magnitude of the variances being requested. If there are any questions?
Thank you. Board members, any questions for Eleni?
Yes, Eleni, the wall you've just referenced, you just said that, and I was over there, I saw the wall as well. The wall is acting as retention there. Are we concerned about the actual location of it? I know that we have a problem with it, but in terms of relative to the septic system, would it have been a recommendation for it to have been brought back closer to the roadway? Is that something that we would have looked into here? Had they come to us and asked for permission? Or is this about what would have to happen just to naturally retain the septic system? I know you've just commented, but I would like to know just whether or not that wall.
Are you talking about which part of that wall are you talking about, Ed? Is that L-shaped wall, the shaded wall on the survey?
Yeah, yeah, that's right. It's the one that
the shaded wall. Right. I think that wall that she's pointing to now within this is not a requirement of the set, but that one now I believe is.
This wall is pre-existing. That's
right,
not part of the application. This here is the stone wall. We wouldn't have allowed it to be constructed within the scenic easement for sure. It would likely, we would have wanted to meet better setbacks for sure. That is something that, however, right now as it is, I guess the board should consider the effect of the sediment sloping down towards the wetlands. Definitely sediment control fencing should be installed during the movement of the wall. If it is allowed to be rebuilt, that would be something that would
I don't believe that wall within the easement is a requirement of the septic system. Just want to clarify that. Is that correct?
No, it's not a requirement.
All right.
But if we ask the applicant to remove that wall, we're going to need a replacement wall to retain the fill that's now in place around the septic system. Will they be coming back to us to look for another wall to take its place, although more in, corresponding further distance from the wetlands and the easement in this case? Is that what you would anticipate here, Lenny? That we'd be looking for another wall anyway?
I believe it could be graded out. However, perhaps the applicant or maybe an engineer might want to speak to that. It looks as though it's not a requirement for the system, so that there are alternative options.
We feel it might be an alternative. That's what I was getting at. There's some alternative to a wall. Yeah.
If I may speak, what was there before was a grassy bank.
Okay.
So I didn't change the level of the lawn. There was simply a grassy bank that curved down into the wetland area.
Thank you. Ed, you got further questions?
No, I do not. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Other board members, any questions?
Well, Lenny, how is the grassy bank compared to what's there now? Is that something that we would like better? Considering it's so close to the harbor and the easement?
Well, realistically, the wall itself being in the easement, it needs to come out.
That needs to come out.
So this board can't grant variances to allow something to remain in the easement, so it needs to move regardless.
Mm-hmm.
But move or replace with the grassy bank. That's what you need to consider. It has no mortar or cement. It is just loose stone. It is not that difficult to move or remove, but something has to be there.
And Lenny, how much of the wall is actually in it? It's portions of it, correct?
It is portions of the wall. So if you zoom in on the survey here. So this portion's not, and this line here is
Yeah,
the scenic
that's the
easement
line.
line.
Oh, okay. That's quite a bit, actually.
Okay. Any further questions?
It's quite a bit at where it comes to the wellhead. It's probably 2 bricks high, whereas the piece that's not in the easement is more like 3 feet high. So it tapers out with the grassy bank.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Okay.
Anything further? Denise, would you like to close us out?
About the public?
What about the public?
Comment?
Oh, I'm sorry. Is there public in, Matt, is there anybody in the public there?
You have 0 callers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
Okay,
go.
Denise.
In the matter of the application of Kevin Bishop, 21 Old Stone Highway, Springs, Suffolk County Tax Map Number 363-5-10. I make a motion to close the public hearing and leave the record open for 2 weeks for the transcript to be posted to the town website.
Just to be clear, 2 weeks. Denise, you mean 2 weeks after the transcript is posted?
Yes.
Yes,
Thank you.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
There we
I
go,
took
2
over
weeks.
that too.
So really 2 weeks from the date of the posting of the transcript.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
I'll second that.
Okay, I'll concur.
I'll concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Bishop.
Thank you for your consideration. I look forward to getting your feedback in due course.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next hearing.
That is Tofino.
Which the applicant is Deborah DeFino at 26 Flag Avenue in Montauk. Suffolk tax map number 300-031-01-28. The applicant is Deborah DeFino. Size and location is 9,550 square feet at 26 Flag Avenue, Oceanside in Montauk, lot 77, map 2730, Montauk. Description is to construct approximately 690 square feet for first and second story additions, an 80 square foot porch addition, a new roof over an existing deck, and an upgraded sanitary system on a parcel of land. Relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420 of the East Hampton Town Code, and 3 variances are required for this application. 2 variances of 4.1 feet are required from 255-430 of the Town Code to construct the proposed additions and porch 95.9 feet from freshwater wetlands where 100-foot setbacks are required. 1 variance of approximately 4.1 foot from 255-1172D of the Town Code is required to allow the proposed addition to exceed the pyramid line by 4.1 feet along the northern lot line, and any other relief necessary. Zoning district is B, residence, AE flood zone, elevation 12. Secret class is type 2. Council, do we have proper affidavit of service and posting?
Yes, we do, and the paperwork appears to be in order.
Okay, do we have the applicant on with us? Oh, I'm sorry. Yep. We have a report here. Terry, this is you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. This is there are 2 front yards on here. So this is the official notice and posting that was along the Coppin Avenue side, which is the south side of the property. Next. Now this is the other official notice that was properly posted on the Flag Avenue side of the property. And there's a couple of things to note on this while we're here. There are a lot of things that are on the property that are off the property line. Those being these pillars that you see. And there's another discussion we'll have a little later on where the 2 shade trees are there toward the upper, to the left side of the posting. That's an area right there where it's proposed to be a drywall, you can see on the survey. And I'm concerned about that with the sheds. You see there's a lot of clearing. It's pre-existing clearing on the entire property. But anyway, let's continue on. Next. This is a shot of the intersection. The applicant's home is on the left side there. And this is looking from north to south. And as noted in the TAM, there are a lot of wetlands in this area. The variances needed are on the east side of the property, and then directly across, diagonally across the intersection, those are wetlands and town-owned property, but that's outside of NRSP jurisdiction for this application. And the south was in scope for a variance for part of the first-story addition that you see on the south side of the survey. However, that was cut back somewhat, and I believe that foot variance is no longer needed on that for the south side. Next. This is shot just, well, a better light, similar to the other one, but just showing a little bit more of the other wetland across on Hoppin Avenue. Many of us are probably familiar with that from 39 Hoppin, which was recently in front of us, which is to the east of that. Next. This is shot up Flag Avenue from the south to the north. We're showing the streetscape there. Next. Now I'm still across the street, and this is a shot of the house from there. The area in front of the structure, the house itself, is where they're proposing a deck and a roof over the decking. Some of that may already exist. And it's set an IA septic system, which was added to the project. It was originally proposed as a standard septic system. Now the upgrade was for the IA system to be put in, and that's in that whole area in front of that house going out toward the street and the property line. These again, the vegetation you see here and the rocks and the bedding, that is all off the property line, off the property. Next. Where am I looking now? Okay, this is a view from the southwesterly side, I believe, of the house. There's a lot of gravel driveway. No, I'm sorry. Take that back. This is the house across the street. One of the neighbors across the street on Flag Avenue. Next. I'll skip that. We already had that. Go ahead. I don't know why these are coming out so dark. This is a shot up from east to west on Coppin Avenue. And you can see these fence partitions, this PVC fencing that belongs to the applicant. This is also well off the property line, off the property, as are the plantings that are there. And again, the pillars that you see in the driveway there. Next. Can everyone see these? Because it's kind of dark on my screen. Okay, so that's just a better shot of that from a little more of a distance. And then you see the south side of the house. The westerly side of that is where the first story addition is proposed. And then I'm going to continue around. All right, that gives you somewhat of a shot still of the back and also the front of the house again on the eastern side where they want to put a deck, proposed roof over the existing deck that's there and expand the deck out toward the south. Next. And that's probably the best shot of that I just said. And then you can see the neighbor to the north there. There is a letter of support from someone on Flag Avenue, but they didn't give the complete address. I don't know if that is that neighbor's home or not. But this is where they want to raise the roof line to add a second story extension to add another bedroom to the home. It's on this northerly side, and that's where the pyramid variance comes into play. Next. That's another, well, a little bit better shot of the neighbor's house to the north, where the second floor extension is being proposed. The second floor extension doesn't show up well on this updated survey we got, but it is, as far as I know, still in scope for the project. And this is a shot of the driveway area. Again, there's a lot of brick and paver patios and walkways, and a lot of grass, again, an absence of native vegetation. Next. This is the north side of the house shooting from east to west. And you can see the property line there, and you can see the neighbor to the west down Coppin Avenue. And they have a lot of structures and things on this property, and more brick patios that you see in the distance there. Next. And this is another shot of going across the back of the house where the second story addition is proposed. Next. And this is a shot now, I believe I'm on the west side of the house. Again, shooting at the neighbor's home there. Next. And this is the side where, as we go, we'll be going south again. And they have, well, you see the decking. And, well, go to the next one, Tyler. Okay. All right. I'm having difficulty seeing it, but that dark area there beyond the steps that are going up, that is where the existing shower is today. And they're proposing an access from the basement, the access area to put in a staircase. The next shot, I believe, shows what's there today. Okay, there it is. So this, where the rocks are piled on top of that, that is where they want to put the stairway out from the basement. And again, you see a lot of brick patio that's around that, and the south side of the house. Next, I think we have a shot of that. So this is where on the south side, next perpendicular to the easement, where the extension is proposed, the first full story extension. Right now in front of that, again, there's a whole bunch of pavers and a bedding for some plantings. Next. And it's just a further shot where it kind of encompasses the basic, the whole property. And again, to show the PVC fencing panels that are there and are not on the property. Next. Is that the last one? Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any board members, any questions for Terry? Do we have the applicant here?
Yes, Chairman Deline, I'm here.
Oh, hi, Britton. How are you? Britton, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay. Before we start, can we confirm the latest survey? I have the latest septic plan being 10/31/21. What is the date of the latest survey?
It's December 10th, 21 that I have.
That is correct.
I have December 10th too.
Okay, then we got it. Okay, very good. I was looking at an earlier version, and I'm like, man, they don't match up. So that's good. I got the one, and they do match up.
Yeah, the one that was on the ZBA file was old.
Yeah, got it. Thank you. Okay, go ahead, Britton.
Good evening, Chairman Deline, members of the board. Britton Bistrian, representing Joe and Deborah DeFino, owners of the property at 26 Flag Avenue. As Member Berger, to give a great field report, the property is a corner lot fronting on both Hopping and Flag Avenue in Ditch Plains. The house was constructed in 1991, and the current owners have owned it since this time. We're here this evening requesting a natural resources special permit and variance relief for minor additions to the residence. Just to give a little history and background, the initial application and review and the technical analysis memo came as a bit of a surprise. We thought it was a small, modest first and second floor additions to a house that had none prior to its initial construction and didn't have any, pool, shed, accessory building, garages or anything. So we took that to heart. We went back to the drawing boards. I spoke with Tyler and we tried to reduce the project to the bare minimum to meet the client's needs for just a little additional living space. The current proposal is for 380 square feet, a 380 square foot first floor addition, broken into two areas, as you can see. The first one is on the southwest. That is a very small kitchen addition of 72 square feet. And then the second story addition, this survey doesn't outline it as well. It's on the east side of the house and the north side of the house. So it should be noted, which I think is, this was like one of those things that befuddled me a little bit because I couldn't figure out why I was having inconsistency in the square footage. But I finally got down to it, is that the existing house is listed in the town records from its construction as being 1,772 square feet. But because the code was changed after 1991 and we count double height areas as gross floor twice, if we reanalyze the house today, it's larger than the house that was constructed because of the way we interpret. So I just think that's interesting to note when there's minor additions that we're getting sort of taxed on an area that already existed and wasn't counted in the records. So in addition to the kitchen addition, which I discussed, the other addition is to an existing master bedroom on the second floor and adding one small additional bedroom to the house.
Can you confirm what the second floor addition is, the square footage wise?
Yes, it's in two parts. I was going to try and scroll up on your screen. If you look at the bottom, no, go back. I just wanted to dive. The bottom left corner is the second floor plan, and the dark shaded walls are the addition. So it's a new bedroom over a living room, and then an expansion of that master bedroom corner. Hang on, I'm just scrolling on a different screen.
The math would suggest 313.
Correct. Sorry, I didn't know that was, yes, it's 380 first floor and 313 second floor.
Thank you. That's all I needed. Thank you.
Since the TAM, we eliminated the two wetlands variances. One was for that kitchen addition I discussed. We just downsized the addition and got out of the 100-foot setback. And the same thing, if you remember from Terry's photograph of the front elevation, it sort of has a little small pediment roof. And when there's a second floor above it, it's just to balance it out, to sort of put more of a roofed entry over the door and the sort of even out. That's an aesthetic. And we also trimmed that porch back as well to not require a variance. So the only variance that we're asking the board for now is a non-environmental variance for the pyramid variance to the neighbor to the north. And I think it's interesting to note that there is a degree of a hardship with that variance because the house was put back at north and west on the lot because of the two front yards. So it sort of pinched the house up against that northern property line, preventing a second floor without a pyramid variance. So we did speak with the neighbor early on in the process. I believe that neighbor's support letter has been in your file for probably at least 18 months.
And Bryn, do you have her name? Because she wrote the letter, but she didn't have her address. It just said Flag Avenue. That neighbor.
I do. I'm gonna have to pull it up, but she's the neighbor to the north of the parcel. It's in your
Yeah, I know we have the letter, which just says Flag Avenue. Never mind, the name is on it. I was just wanting to confirm the address.
Yes, I can tell you it's the property directly to the north that's impacted by the variance.
Can we pull up the pyramid diagram? Just take a look at it.
There's no pyramid variance on it now, right? Britton, you said?
No, there is still a pyramid variance. You can see it right there in the, right there. Hold it. See the 45? The pyramid variance is that 2 feet, right where it intersects just beyond the chimney for that roof line. And that's solely to keep the same pitch and, you know, not have that awkward roof that it has now. Is that clear?
So you're redoing the roof to move that out in that area?
Right, that's only one story. If you look at that diagram, see the dotted line where it has an arrow that says existing roof? It's only one story. That's the 1 story area. So that's the 2nd floor addition.
Right, okay. And you're adding to the chimney too? Is that going up? I thought I saw that.
No, it's existing.
No? It's all existing, as is.
As is. So, I just lost my spot. So in general, if you walk up and down Coppin Avenue and Flag, you know, this house is pretty in keeping. It's pretty modest additions. I don't really know the answer to whether the septic upgrade would have been required. With this reduced scope of work, it definitely was initially, but we kept it in the project. I will note that initially when we designed the septic, it required retaining walls, and new technology came online while we were in the zoning board process, and we were able to redesign the septic with a different manufacturer and get rid of those retaining walls that would have been on Flag Avenue and the neighboring northern property line. So that was a positive that happened in the development of the scope.
I mean, out of curiosity, I was going to ask that question because, you know, the 2 systems, they're both IWTS systems, and we eliminate the wall. So thank you for that. I was going to ask you that. Just
right. So it came up in Tyler's memo in the TAM or in discussions with Tyler, and we said, you know, let's look into it. So he completely redesigned it for that. I mean, I honestly believe that we took his comments to heart and tried to, you know, tweak as much as we could to sort of address the review that we initially had gotten, and this was the result. I also want to note, and I actually have this at my own house, so it's a sensitive issue, but the wetlands are across, both wetlands that impact this property are across paved roads, which I think is something significant. And we're not within the 100 foot of them now with this scope. So I think in summation, this was the minimum to give these, you know, the clients have lived in this house for 30 years. I don't think there's many houses in East Hampton that you could say you've been there for 30 years and no one ever applied for a building permit since it was initially constructed. It's a family home, and they just wanted to have slightly more space and make it slightly more usable for their growing family. So I hope the board finds that it's a well thought out proposal. It's really the minimum to meet their needs. And I hope the board finds the same.
Thank you.
I'm ready to answer any questions that you may have.
Board members, any questions?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. Let's go back to the septic system in the TAM. Tyler suggested that you should provide additional details regarding the proposed sanitary system because of the excavation.
Right, and that was Tyler reviewing the initial septic that was called Septic Design 1. This is Septic Design 2 that was redesigned to address those comments.
And Terry, I might just say, I studied that first septic system would have been really difficult to construct. The tolerances, I don't know. I was looking at that and man, this is going to be a tough one. So looking at the new one, I think it's going to be much intrusive.
How does it change the excavations? Is that noted?
It's a shallow. You don't have deep pools here. It's a shallower excavation. So this is leaching. This is like leaching mat, right?
Yeah. When you see those long rectangular forms, those are the irrigation piping, for lack of a technical word, that just sits just below ground level. And whereas this typical system, goes down for an 8-foot well or what have you.
So there's no excavation? Or?
There's always excavation.
There's always
But it's limited with a drain field because it's more surface mounted. Right.
And how many bedrooms are in the house right now, Britt?
There are 1, 3.
There were 3, and you're adding 1.
Correct, and expanding 1.
If it's approved, okay. Now that system though, I thought, and maybe this again goes back to the first system, that it was an oversized septic for this property. Perhaps, and in that space that the distance for the septic from the wetlands is like 101 feet.
I'm not certain I understand the question.
And
I'm
that
sorry.
the expansions of the home and the septic system, that it might be best served as a complete redevelopment for better placement of the septic system. Is this septic system designed for the 4 bedrooms?
Yeah, I think those are the comments that were on the initial septic design that you're referring to in Tyler's memo.
Okay, we can have Tyler.
This system was redesigned to address those comments, but is Tyler on?
He will be. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, going back to on the survey, where you have a proposed dry well there where the shad trees are in existence right now, the native trees.
Yes, those dry wells are added because there isn't currently. And so that was another NRSP mitigation. That's an 8-foot dry well ring shown. I think it's diagrammatic. They absolutely would not want to disturb those trees. So we could just put in, 2 lawn drains to carry that, or put it in the driveway with a grate.
Right.
There's a million ways to solve that. Those are just to show that we, included drainage in our proposal.
Okay, but you will update that to save the trees if it's approved.
Sure. If you want to write in the condition that we're not going to take out those 2 shad trees as a condition of approval, we're absolutely fine with that. That wouldn't be their intent in any event.
Okay. And the brick patios that are around in the walkways, were those, I didn't see them on the property card as part of the CMO.
I believe they matched the CO survey. There was a time period where we didn't list those. There's always that, holdover from many years ago with the brick patios and sand, didn't need permits and didn't get covered under COs. And I believe this is that circumstance. But they're outside of jurisdiction. And if we need to legalize any square footage of them, we'll do that at the building department.
Okay. And I know we can't approve anything. What about all the fencing and other things that are off the property entirely?
That's an interesting question. I believe the pillars show on the CO survey. What I've done in this circumstance before, there's a lot of these old roads, it's a 66-foot wide road. And as you saw, they're sort of country roads that are, more reasonably like 30. So the road right of way is double the width of the actual paved road. And usually you go to the highway superintendent and have them review whether they're impeding the lanes of traffic, and they usually will write a letter that will cover them. But that will be something that we'll also have to deal with at the building department, I would assume.
Well, they're quite a bit off the property too. I believe about almost 20 feet. And that and the PVC fencing.
They're not on the property, so.
I know, we can't. Okay, we'll address that. All right.
Anybody else have questions? Ed?
Just one question, Mr. Chair. Written, I see that on the floor plans here, on the basement level, it's listed there's 6 foot 8 inch ceiling height there. Is that currently the case? Is the basement now at the full depth it's going to be in order to complete this renovation?
Correct. The only changes to the cellar is that, you know, it's almost like what we used to call bulkheads, that it's an improper, you know, you saw in the photograph, it had that blue tarp and the rocks. The concept is just to make that a proper stairway with poured concrete stairs. Right now, it's just an awkward sort of bulkhead and entrance to a basement. And since we're doing the foundation work adjacent for that 72 square foot kitchen addition, it just makes sense to just run that foundation, redo that foundation wall and make it a proper stair. That's the only work in the basement.
Thank you. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just have one more comment. I know you commented that this house is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood, and there are some houses in this area. The neighborhood, as it originally existed, with small cottages and beach houses and all that, it's changing. But I don't know that it's completely in keeping with this house is in keeping with the character of the neighborhood. But it's just my comment. If you drive around Ditch, it's a kind of a mixed type of environment now as far as the homes.
Okay. Tim, you have any questions?
No, Mr. Chair.
I am too. I'm fine. Can we go to Tyler? I believe we got that one.
Tyler Borsek for the Planning Department.
Yeah, Tyler, do you swear affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Go ahead. Thank
Good
you.
evening. So just for some background on the area, the wetlands pertinent in this application are on several town-owned parcels to the south and to the east, as was sort of already mentioned. These wetlands are an important component of the largest watercourse in the Ditch Plains watershed and contain high-quality native vegetation. Large amounts of water flow through these watercourses. Water flows north and east through a series of wetlands, ditches, and culverts, and eventually discharges into the southern end of Lake Montauk. Wetlands such as these provide essential habitat for wetland-dependent plants and animals within the dense residential development of Ditch Plains. Ditch Plains is in the Montauk Subwatershed 7, which is characterized as generating the most runoff within the entire watershed, partially because of an almost total absence of sandy soil types necessary for good drainage. As a result of the increased development and poorly draining soils, stormwater runoff volume and flow rates throughout the watercourse increases. Overall water quality suffers from ever-increasing nitrogen and sediments that ultimately course their way into Lake Montauk. It is this non-point pollution from Ditch Plains watershed and its tributary system that is most likely a significant contributing factor to the poor water quality and high pollution concentrations in the southern end of Lake Montauk. Given the changes that have been made to the application, it is the planning department's opinion that the proposed level of development is potentially more than appropriate considering the constraints of the property. Considering the significant wetlands within close proximity and the fact that the greatest setbacks that are able to be provided for the sanitary system is only 103 feet, it is the planning department's opinion that the increasing the size of the residence close to the maximum allowable gross floor area could be a poor precedent to set for the Ditch Plains area in Montauk and the town in general. The subject property is surrounded by many similarly constrained properties in the Ditch Plain area. And what is approved on this property could have implications on what is approved on similarly constrained properties. Granting a residence which is approaching the maximum gross floor area and already has a significant amount of impermeable surfaces would be a significant shift in the character of the neighborhood, especially considering there's not any significant mitigation that could really be offered to offset that increase. Increasing the size of the residence does allow for more people to live in a residence more comfortably, especially with the addition of a bedroom. Upgrading the sanitary system to a low nitrogen system should not be a reason to increase the size of a residence, but rather should be used to further mitigate the impacts of an appropriately sized development. The increase in the total coverage could similarly set a poor precedent, increasing even closer to the maximum allowable on a parcel that is already has a significant amount of coverage. While the amount of total lot coverage has decreased in the most recent submission, any increase is directly related to the amount of runoff that can be expected from the parcel. The planning department feels that the requested natural resources special permit does not meet the standards for the board's review. The proposed project is not in keeping with the orderly growth of the town, proposing a large residence in an area that is known to have significant flooding issues, is surrounded by important wetlands, which impact areas beyond the boundaries of the parcel itself, and is in an area that has historically been improved with more limited development of each individual parcel. The planning department would recommend reducing the level of development or completely redeveloping the property in order to move the sanitary system to the northwest corner of the property in order to achieve the greatest setback possible. And as was already mentioned, the sanitary system has gone through a pretty significant change from what was originally approved. There was originally going to be cutting rings, which and there's going to be excavation of like 26 feet of fill. And now they're using the shallow trench drain system, which is significantly less disturbance to the area. So that is something worth noting in comparison to the original submission that the technical analysis memo was written on. Other than that, I can answer any questions you might have.
And Tyler, the impact of the added dry wells, in your opinion?
As far as for runoff control, it's certainly an improvement over what's existing. Comparatively, absolutely, yeah.
Right. Board members, you have questions for Tyler?
Tyler, can you comment on the fact that the wetlands are across the street? I know this is a kind of a central culverted area of the watershed and the water courses in this area.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the larger impacts would certainly be the sanitary system, which the road right-of-ways wouldn't really have any impact on that. But certainly any runoff coming off the property is ending up in more than likely in the wetlands, depending on how the roads are drained. But a lot of it does end up in the wetlands, regardless if it's
okay. Regardless of this, yeah. Okay. Right. Thank you.
Any other questions for Tyler?
No.
Matt, do we have anybody in? Was it Ed? Did you say that? Did you have a question?
Oh, I'm fine, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Matt, do we have anybody in the public?
We do have one caller, and I will unmute them right now. Last four digits, 6961.
Last four digits, 6961.
Okay, caller, you're going to have to mute your device or TV, whatever you're listening to.
6961. I don't have the. Okay, caller, you're going to have to mute your device or TV, whatever you're listening to.
Hello, caller. Are you here for the Defino application?
Yes, I am. Yes, I am.
Okay. Can you state your name and your address, please?
Yes, my name is Joseph Defino. I'm here with Deborah Defino. We are the owners of the property.
Okay. Are you an attorney?
No, I am not.
Okay. Do you swear affirm to tell the truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Would you like to add anything to this conversation?
Yeah, the only thing I would like to add is Britton. She's indicated everything that we had wanted to basically to present to the board. We've been there for 30 years. Basically the only thing that's different now is that our family has grown from when we started there 30 years ago. We now have 3 grandchildren, and I know how the planner says the comfort is not a good reason to expand our property. We're not going to do anything different. We don't rent this property. We don't plan on doing anything different. Whether we get this addition approved or not, nothing's going to change. We're going to still bring our grandchildren out there and do the same thing. We're hoping that by doing the septic system. It's going to be good for the environment. If we don't do this, if we don't get approved, we won't do the septic system, and everything will stay the same. Nothing at all will change. So basically, all we're saying is that it is for comfort, and I know the planner doesn't like the idea of us having more comfort because he said that in the letter, which I was very disappointed that somebody would say that. This is a family, and it's been a family that's been out there. We love the area. We love the town.
We camp out there from the 70s.
It's just, I just don't understand, and it is heartbreaking that we basically, may not get this approved. I mean, I just don't understand. I mean, so that's all we want to say. The one person on the board has mentioned this is not within the area. If you go 100 feet down the block north, they're building a house that is unbelievable, and it's not within the area. If you go take a look, it's obvious that that property is not within the area. And then you would basically say, this is not within the area. This house is basically going to look nicer. We've kept it beautifully over the years. I don't understand. I mean, all we do is put a couple of nice fences up along the side, and we're told that it's not on the property line. I don't know if it's on the property line. We wanted the place to look beautiful, and that's what we've done, and that's been basically what we've been doing for the last 30 years. So all I'm saying as the owner of this property with my wife is that this is really the direction we're going in. Nothing will change. We will still bring the same people. We'll still use the same septic, but it'll be the old septic. We're trying to do what's best for that area. We love Montauk. We love the area. We hope to retire out there, and that's the bottom line. And I'm sorry if I'm a little emotional, but it's been 2 years to get to this point, and we're just hoping that the board will consider that we're people that are basically just trying to raise a family and bring our grandchildren out and just have a life.
Thank you, Mr. Tofino. With that, no other callers? Terry, Britton, would you like to do a final address?
I would just quickly. I just want to note a couple things that I didn't have the opportunity to address. The idea that you could fit the septic system in the northwest corner of that property, it doesn't fit, as you can see with the pressurized drain field. I don't have the real estate to put it there, so the placement is the best location. It's also, it is 100 feet from the wetlands, and so the placement is the best location.
I'm going to have to mute them.
Thank you.
Please proceed.
And I just also wanted to note the building coverage issue. It came up that there was, additional coverage. If you look at that survey, it's pretty clear that the first floor addition is 72 square feet, and the other addition is basically, other than that small bump out, is on top of the existing coverage. So the building coverage impact is non-existent. And I just want to focus in on the fact that this property has never undergone a zoning board review and has had the same owners for 30 years who now want to add some minor additions. And I just don't want to lose sight of that. And that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Terry, would you like to close us out?
Yep. Okay. In the application for Deborah DeFino at 26 Flag Avenue in Montauk, tax map 300-031-01-28, and make a motion to close the public hearing and to leave the public record open for 2 weeks after the date of the posting of this hearing to the town website.
You mean after the date of the posting of the transcript of this hearing?
Transcript of this hearing, yes. Thank you.
Oh, in that case, I'll second it.
Okay.
I concur.
I concur.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Thank you.
Evening.
We'll move on to the next hearing, which is Carrie Davis and John McKinn at 275 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Highway in Springs, Suffolk tax map number 300-075-01-32.2. The applicant is Carrie Davis and John McKinn. Size and location is 100,020 square feet, 275 3 Mile Harbor Hog Creek Highway in Springs. The description is to construct a dock consisting of a 4-foot by 40-foot fixed catwalk, a 3-foot by 20-foot aluminum ramp, a 4-foot by 24 floating dock on a parcel of land containing coastal bluffs and adjacent to surface tidal waters. The relief sought is a natural resources special permit pursuant to 255-420 of the town code. The zoning district is A2 residence, VE, and X flood zones. The secret class is type 2. Denise, I think you're doing the report. Council, do we have a proper affidavit of service and posting?
Yes, we do, and the paperwork appears to be in order.
Thank you. Denise?
Okay, thank you. This is the official notice. Next. This is the stair facing west. This is actually the top level of the stairs. There's actually 2 gates. Two section of stairs with 2 gates. This is the first level. Next. Sorry. This is the second section of the stairs facing west. And at the very bottom, that is where they're proposing to put the catwalk. Next, please. This is the landing directly to the north of the bottom of the stairs I just showed you. Next. I wanted to show the shoreline facing north. If you look, you can see East Hampton Point Marina in the background. Next, please.
That's
Next,
the last
please.
photo.
Oh, wait, I had one more. I also showed a photo of the bulkhead facing south. I'm sorry, somehow that might have not made it in. That's the only one that didn't make it in.
I do believe we had those photos elsewhere in the thing. We can relate to them. There is one on the applicant's report.
Okay. I also, I'm working from survey, just want to make sure it's the right one when the applicant comes before us. September 29th, 2020. I'd also like the applicant to address if the dock complies with dimensional standards and alternatives for new docks. That would be section 255-551H3 of the town code. I'd also like them, if they could, to address whether the dock complies with environmental protections listed in 255-451-4, which would be regarding public use, degradation of water, safe navigation, and effect on shellfishing. That's my field inspection.
Thank you. Members, do we have any questions for Denise?
No.
Great. Do we have the agent for the applicant here?
I would have to unmute them if you can give me a second, Mr. Chairman. Unmuting last 4 digits of 6608.
Thank you. This is Richard Whalen. I am the attorney for the applicants.
How are you, Richard?
Very good. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Welcome, Denise. I'm going to be speaking first and hopefully briefly, and then Brent Reiner, who is the senior environmental analyst or scientist, I should say, for Nelson Pope and Voorhees, will address a bit more of the substance of the application, including some of the environmental issues that Denise just asked about. So first of all, the background, this application has been pending since 2020, but in fact it actually goes back to 2018 when the first soundings were taken to see if this was a viable project under the town code and the DEC regulations. And once we did the soundings, we determined that it was something that could be pursued, and we've done that to this point. As you probably know, there are lots of other agencies involved in the dock permitting. We have approvals from all other involved agencies. The town trustees approved the project this past fall. You may know or may not know, this area of Three Mile Harbor is the only trustee-owned bottomland in the entire town where the trustees do not prohibit new docks. So we got trustee approval. We also got from the New York State DEC a tidal wetlands permit, we have Army Corps of Engineers approval, a New York State Department of State consistency certification, and a determination from the New York State Office of General Services that from them no permit is required. I'm just going to address the compliance with the town code standards, and this will hit some of what Denise was asking about, and then I will turn my presentation over to Mr. Reiner. So the application as proposed to you, we believe, complies with the standards and safeguards for residential docks, and those are set forth in addition to the general special permit standards in 5-40, the specific standards for residential docks are set forth in Town Code Section 255-5-51H. Some of these issues that I'm going to hit on were also mentioned in the Planning Department's technical analysis memo. First, the dock is the minimum length necessary to reach the specified water depth in the town code. The Planning Department had suggested possibly shifting the dock southward by about 40 feet to reach that depth of water in a shorter distance. We feel there are valid reasons not to do that. First of all, there is a shoal. You'll see on the bathymetric soundings, there is a shoal kind of about dead center out from the property. If you move the dock south, and any boat that is docking there becomes uncomfortably close to that shoal water. The other thing is that the stairway, which they showed you in the photographs, the stairs currently come down towards the northern end of the property. That's the lowest point of the bluff. If we don't meet the dock there, we either have to put down new stairs further south on an undisturbed, steeper, and taller part of the bluff, or we would have to run a lateral walkway along the top of the bulkhead. So starting the dock where we do allows us to, it avoids any further disturbance to the bluff, and it involves no additional area of shorefront structure. The dock and ramp will be fully removable in the winter, but it's not intended that the catwalk be removed. The town code sections involved, and I should point out actually that I wrote section 255-5-51. This is back in the mid to late 1990s when Tom Noble was a town councilman. It distinguishes a fixed catwalk from the remainder of the dock. So the catwalk will remain in place. We basically don't intend to remove pilings because annual removal and reinstallation of pilings increases disturbance of the bottomland. Also, the catwalk is needed to support oyster cages, which are part of the trustee mitigation for the dock approval. I also want to point out that both the dock and the catwalk are less than the permitted width of dock under the town code section I cited again. 5-51 allows a maximum width of 5 feet. Our structure is only maxed out at 4 feet wide. And finally, there's no really suitable alternative to the dock for boating access. This was an issue that was thoroughly vetted by the town trustees. The applicants have 2 young children, and the main concern here is that without a dock, if you're using something like a rig and pulley line, that's not really very safe for kids, especially in rough weather, and you're trying to get them on or off a boat. So the determination was that the only thing that's really safe, especially when the children are involved, is to have a dock, and since we have the depth of water for the dock, that's what we proposed. I'm going to turn my presentation over to, as I said, Brant Reiner, Senior Environmental Analyst at Nelson Pope and Voorhees, and I think Mr. Reiner will discuss the absence of adverse environmental impacts from the dock and also the mitigated measures that have been incorporated into the project. Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Reiner. Is he?
Mr. Chairman, Denise had asked for the date of the latest survey to confirm some information. Does Rick have that?
Rick, do you have the latest survey available? Date?
Let me see if I do. First of all, is it Nelson Pope and Voorhees? Let's see if they cite the date of the survey here.
We have September 29th.
Maybe he can answer that. Yeah.
Brand should be actually on your video. That's he's taking my video spot here.
The one I have is not.
Well, let me see what I have as the latest, and I think I can answer the question. Hold on. Let me just find it here.
I have September 29th, 2020 in my packet. I don't know. Yeah. That's the latest one I have.
Hang on. Sure, you gotta get to my survey folder. The last survey that I have is it's a 2021 survey, and it's last revised February 26, 2021. February 26, 2021, a SASCA survey.
Okay.
And I believe that is up to date. Okay. Hopefully Brand is there.
Hello, is Brent online here?
Can everyone hear me?
Sure.
Yes. Hi, Grant. Can you say your name and who you're with?
Yes, good evening. Just want to make sure everyone can hear me. This is Brant Reiner from Nelson Pope and Voorhees. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman.
Grant, if you will, I swear you in if you're not an attorney. Do you swear or affirm or swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So thank you for allowing me to present tonight. I'd like to share my screen. Would that be possible? So I can do a quick PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Can you see my screen right now?
Not yet.
How about now?
Yes.
Okay. So again, Brant Reiner from Nelson Pope and Voorhees, 70 Maxis Road, Melville, New York. I'm a senior environmental scientist with 18 years of environmental planning, land use development experience. Nelson Pope and Voorhees was asked to analyze the existing dock and the potential ecological impacts associated with such relative to the town's dock and NRSP standards. So we looked at the project site, we went out and inspected it. It's a single-family residential development, as you all know, with a house and some accessory improvements on the upland areas. It's located along the east side of 3 Mile Harbor. There's 236 linear feet of bulkheaded shoreline that is protecting the coastal bluff. The bulkhead was recently replaced with all proper permits in place. That includes an NRSP from the town planning division. And there is a staircase that traverses the bluff that has been in existence for a very long time. It is stable, structurally sound, and it is surrounded by a vegetated bluff that will be, it is intended to be revegetated pursuant to a revegetation plan that was submitted for town approval. The revegetation will include a removal of invasive species and the incorporation of appropriate seaside native vegetation. 3 Mile Harbor, not to get too deep into this, but LWRP recognizes it as a boating and fishing mecca, I should say. It's a primary uses for that tidal water body. It's approximately 1,000 square acres. The underwater land is, of course, owned by the East Hampton Town trustees. It connects to Gardner's Bay via an inlet that is a channel that's been dredged, managed with protected by jetties. Again, the East Hampton Town trustees, as Rick had alluded to, do permit docks along the eastern shoreline that is associated with the project site. The proposed dock, as we was quickly addressed, is a 4 by 40 foot catwalk extending from the bulkhead. The placement of the dock was appropriately sited due to the existing location of the staircase. The catwalk will be supported by 8-inch diameter untreated tropical arbor.
Can we revisit this? Because I know this question is out there from the assessment of the town. Is the reason the dock is located there is because of the stairway, as you just stated?
It is one of the primary
So the
reasons.
question if there's our job is to grant the minimum necessary. This is not a variance request, this is an NRSP. Is to look at other alternative locations, and the EAS brings that up. And if my question is, if the stairs, why not relocate the stairs and bring the dock into a more conforming location, if you will, or more environmentally better, safe, benefiting location to the.
So that's a good question, Mr. Chairman, and it's a little ahead of where I was getting to, but I'll address that really quickly. So the existing staircase, again, has existed for a very long time. It's stabilized. To remove it and relocate it to another area along the bank would destabilize potentially a part of the slope, at least temporarily, risking certain environmental impacts that, in my opinion, may be unnecessary, because not only does the proposed dock in its current location attach or extend from the existing staircase, it also meets the appreciable water depths that are necessary to minimize or actually eliminate potential impacts to the harbor bottom. The water depths, if you look at this plan that's before you on this slide right here, the water depths are substantial right here. I mean, you see this 4-foot water depth right here, and then 3.5-foot depth that extends into here. What you're seeing is if you pulled a boat up to the south side of the floating dock, there is, in my opinion, there's very little, if no chance at all, for the prop to make contact with or release sediment from the bottom. The shorter you make this structure, even if you were to move it south, the more potential you have you start to see that these contours tighten up, and as contours tighten up on a two-dimensional drawing like this, the steeper the slope starts to get, and you get into shallower waters much quicker. So you do risk the potential of a boat that's pulled up somewhere in this southerly section. The boat has more of a likelihood of making contact with the bottom at some point. So again, the 80-foot is the standard that's set forward in the code, and in our professional opinion, the dock as designed meets that requirement and has the least potential.
I just would like to clarify something. The 80 feet is a maximum required by code, not the standard. Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that may be.
So I just wanted to get that straight.
Rick can speak to the legalities of that. I just was making.
No, your statement was that
is correct, Mr. Chairman. That is
maximum. Okay,
Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. So to clarify, yes, the maximum allowance is 80 feet. We meet that allowance in this location. And again, I believe that if you look at this in the overall scope of the contours that are shown on this map, you see that this location offers the least potential for ecological impacts relative to boats moving up to it and barges coming in to remove the float and the ramp for seasonal storage. So I would ask the Zoning Board of Appeals to take that into consideration in your deliberations, that the further you move this dock south, the tighter those contours get, and the quicker you get to shallower waters. So if that sort of sums up our position on that, I would like to continue, or I can answer more questions on that.
And I'll just ask you, saying that this is part of your report. So we do have that in front of us. So if you can, as long as you don't go item for item through your report, we're going to be here all night. So,
no.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was going to make the same request. If you're going to be submitting this to the record, there's no reason for you to read it to us. You could summarize it to us, and that would be better. Thanks.
Yep, that's fine. All of this is in the environmental report. So We did look at the tidal wetland maps and identified underwater lands. It's important to understand that we are in wetland areas that are of deep water. Surface waters were evaluated. I would like the board to recognize that owners are participating in 2 separate shellfish grow-out programs. One is a seeding program, and the other is a shellfish hatchery oyster grow-out program, where they will grow shellfish from their dock and then seed the areas immediately adjacent to the project site. We know that oysters do filter waters naturally, so they're important for the ecosystem. Turbidity curtains will be installed as part of the construction activity to limit or capture siltation. No jetting of the piles will be permitted. Again, this will limit the turbidity. And we believe that these activities will address the town standards for NSRP from a surface water perspective. Looking at the habitat, no eelgrass beds were identified in the project location. The float will not rest on the bottom, and propellers will not disturb bottomlands because there's 3.5 feet of water depth. The float will be chalked with blocks to prohibit the float from resting on the bottom. If we were to get an irregular, very low tide, ramps and floats will be removed seasonally. Through float decking on the catwalks to allow light penetration. Catwalks, the catwalk piles will be installed at a distance that's 10 foot on center to reduce the number of piles. It's important to understand that we're only needing to install a total of 11 piles for this entire structure. That's 8 for the catwalk and 3 for the float. And again, the structure will provide habitat for shellfish, and it will not deter waterfowl. So we believe, again, this meets the NRSP standards.
Okay, can you just stay on that slide for a second? And I have a question on the eelgrass that's bolded in your report. No eelgrass today. Is that the standard you're designing this on? Because what about eelgrass yesterday, or what about potential of eelgrass in the future, when especially the town is taking extraordinary measures to clean up the harbor, and the benefit of that is a return of eelgrass. So are we looking at no eelgrass today as a measure for approving this dock?
No, I mean, I think that's a good point. We looked at
I noticed a little bit more eelgrass in this year. Anyway, I think so. Anyway, I would like to get that verified, but I don't think that's a good standard for looking at when we're trying to improve the quality of the harbor.
Well, it was just a point that was to be made that there are no eelgrass beds in the area at this time that would be impacted by the installation of the dock. And just because the dock is installed, it wouldn't necessarily.
But how is that a habitat mitigation?
Well, again, looking at the standard, the code asks whether the dock will result in the destruction of beds of eelgrass. If you look at the bullet point right above it, and we were just making the point that there are no eelgrass beds in that location for there to be destructed.
Mr. Chairman, could I answer that question in part?
Sure.
I just want to make the point that there are only 11 pilings. They're 8 inches, 8 inches in width associated with the entire structure. The maximum width of the float or the catwalk is only 4 feet. In all cases, it's at least 4 feet above the natural underlying grade. So there's basically no shading effect associated with this. If eelgrass were to begin to grow in this area, I don't see how the dock would impede the growth of that eelgrass. It should not.
Okay. Okay, you move on.
Yep, so Rick just touched on a couple good points. Again, in summation, extending the structure from the existing staircase would limit impacts on the bluff. This dock will not impede navigation. It's close to active commercial marinas that are directly to the north. Untreated materials and light penetrating materials will allow minimal impact. Elevated structures promotes light penetration. Again, 4 foot minimum above grade the structure will be. The seasonal float and ramp will be removed. The ramp and float will be removed seasonally. There are sufficient water depths, and the float will be chalked to keep it from sitting on the bottom, so you will have no prop dredging as well. No jetting for pile installation. Contractor is aware that environmentally sensitive construction practices must be maintained for this procedure. And the structure will enhance multiple town shellfish seeding programs. I think that's important for the board to consider. Not too often do we see private property owners entering into an agreement to promote multiple town shellfish seeding programs. So I would like the board to consider that a net benefit in the overall approval and construction of this dock. More so, the owners have also agreed to covenant against the neighboring property to the north, which they also own, for no future docks or bulkheads. So in exchange for a dock in this location, they have agreed to forego their rights for submitting applications for a future dock or bulkhead on that property. And again, there was extensive environmental reviews done over the past 2 to 3 years from multiple agencies, trustees, DEC, Department of State, and Army Corps. And as the board may be aware that the Army Corps does a referral out to other federal agencies such as U.S. Fish and Wildlife, EPA, and NOAA that also submit their comments to the Corps before they can submit a permit for construction of docks. So that being said, it is our opinion that the dock as designed complies with the town's natural resources special permit standards, and there will be little, if any, adverse impacts on the ecology of 3 Mile Harbor.
Can you address 255, 451-4, where it dealing with the interference of public use and how that a dock will affect that and not affect that?
So, I'm sorry. In terms of affecting or not affecting public use of the shorelines, the catwalk is going to be elevated above grade by 4 feet, which would allow pedestrians to pass and repass underneath the structure readily at low or high tides. Currently, when the tide is at high tide, the water is up against the bulkhead. At low tide, there is very little beach to walk on. But the owners have no intention of prohibiting people from moving along the seaward side of the bulkhead.
What about in the water, like paddleboarders? There's a business right up the shore from this that has a business that has paddleboarding as a business. How will that affect that?
Well, it's been brought to my attention that there is a dock on the neighboring property to the south, immediately adjacent this property. And I believe that dock has been there for a very long time. I do not know the history of it, but from what I've been told, if that dock is in place, it would have the same potential impacts for paddleboarders or kayakers or anybody else using the surface waters around this area.
Okay, thank you. Other board members, you have questions?
Can you address, go ahead, you go ahead.
No, go ahead, Denise.
I'd like you to address the safe navigation for other boaters in that area.
Can I speak to that? I think I may have more knowledge on that, than Brandt.
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay.
Richard Whalen here. Again, Richard Whalen for the record. So in the fall of 2020, Madeline Narvillis, who's also involved from my office, and Tyler Armstrong, met with Ed Michaels, who was then the chief harbor master. Now, unfortunately, Ed wouldn't put anything in writing unless directly asked by the reviewing board, so we don't have something in writing. But at that meeting, Ed agreed that there was no impact on navigation or the navigation channel from this dock. Brad was just referring to the immediately adjacent property to our south has a pre-existing dock. Apparently, it's taken out in the wintertime, so it doesn't show in all the aerials. You will see it on at least one of our aerials. We have a south-facing photograph, and you can see the pilings from that dock. That's a longer dock than our proposed dock, and of course, just about 3 or 4 properties to our north is the Wings Point dock, which again, that's a commercial property, and that extends further out from the shoreline than ours. So if anybody wants to paddleboard into this area, they're free to do it. It's all public waters. In terms of walking on the beach, at a high tide, you can't walk in front of the bulkhead in front of either our property or the neighbor's property to the south. So I think our effect on public use of the waters and the foreshore is extremely minimal.
Okay. Other questions, board members?
Well, as part of the shellfish, the oyster seeding, are they allowing other members of the public to use that area? Or the dock?
Yeah, let me address this. So,
or is that limited to
So there were 2 things that the applicant's proposing to do, and these were, I will say, well received by the trustees. Number 1, the town has an oyster seeding program. The applicants are committed to, there'll be a 10-year agreement, they'll be committed to contributing financially to that program, and this is something John McGinn, if he's on the call, may want to comment on later, but they will contribute to the oyster seeding. The other thing that we're going to do is we're going to be attaching oyster cages to the bottom of the catwalk. Those will be in the water, and I'm not exactly sure I guess those cages will probably be turned over to the Department of Aquaculture, and they will then, reset the oysters, but we're doing everything possible to make sure that we're actually producing more shellfish that are being produced in that area. And as far as whatever shellfish are there, it's public bottomland. So anybody is free to come in and clam, oyster, do whatever shellfishing they can. The only thing, obviously, you butt up against the dock. You've got a couple feet where maybe you can't go under the dock. But other than that, it's all public bottomland, all open for shellfishing.
So they could do that without a dock too, right?
Yeah, but our dock will contribute oyster spat that's not currently being produced in this area.
Okay. Other board members, any other questions?
Just the covenant for the future dock and on the property to the north, or the bulkhead. Do those exist today? There's nothing there now.
No. Well, the applicants own the lot to the north. They are proposing to covenant in perpetuity that there will be basically no alteration of that shorefront. I will note that a little bit of the existing bulkhead does extend onto the property to the north. You can see that on the photograph. I mean, obviously, we won't be removing that, but no additional docking, bulkheading, revetment, all of that on the neighboring property, which is about the same width as the subject property. All that would be permanently prohibited.
Okay. Other questions, or do we turn it over to Brian?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to hear from Brian if we could.
Yep, I agree. Brian?
Good evening again, Mr. Chairman. Brian Frank on behalf of the Planning Department.
Yes, Brian, you're sworn in, right?
Okay. I'm going to go to the special permit standards for a moment because I think this is an important application. And, Rick is a bit of a historian and has a lot of experience with the board as well as with the trustees. So I'll certainly invite his correction if I misspeak here. But this is probably the first application for a new dock, not the repair or replacement of an existing dock, but the first application for a new dock in more than 20 years. This is a section of the code that is not used very often. It doesn't come up very often, obviously, as a result of that. And as a result of that, it's important that the board take a look at these standards closely and really evaluate this structure according to these special permit standards. The the town's dock standards, as they've been incorporated in the code, have been designed to limit docks so that they are most appropriately located and are the minimum size necessary. And that's why there are specific standards for docks in the special permit standards of the town code. Right away, before we even get into the dock itself, the regulations require that before approving a dock under the provisions of subsection H2, which have the specifications that we'll talk about in a little bit more detail, the board shall have first considered all reasonable alternatives which allow the applicant to safely access and utilize a boat. And I'm going to respectfully offer that if the threshold for dismissing reasonable alternatives are the presence of young children, you might as well remove this standard from the code. You can bet that other applications will also involve small children, the elderly, or other physically limited people. So I think, that this code provision really speaks to physical limitations of the use of something like a free swinging mooring or a rig and pulley system, not the personal circumstances of the applicant, which might be better suited for and evaluated with the variance standards. Some of the other standards that are in the dock regulations are that every part of the dock except the piling shall be designed and shall be used so that it is removed during the winter and reinstalled in the spring, and is fully removable with the exception of the pilings. Obviously, the 40-foot fixed catwalk is not going to be fully removable. The regulations do allow for a catwalk. I'll point out that catwalk, the maximum that's allowed by the town code is the 40 feet, and that's what's been proposed here. I think the most important section here, and then I want to go to a couple of aerial shots in the survey, is that the dock shall be the minimum length necessary to reach a point where the water depth at the seaward terminus of the dock, inclusive of the catwalk, is 3 feet at mean low water, provided that at no such point, I'm going to paraphrase that, 80 feet is basically the maximum. So this dock is not the minimum, it's the maximum. The code caps the dock length at 80 feet. It caps the catwalk at 40 feet, both of which are what is proposed in this application. Member Savarese did have a photograph south facing from the bulkhead, and I don't know why I didn't have that available. My apologies. I do want to show you a little bit about the property right now. This is the bluff crest, and I do want to acknowledge that the applicants have maintained a 10-foot buffer to the bluff.
Brian, you're not sharing your screen. Are you intending to share your screen?
I was. I thought I apologize. Oh, goodness. Sorry, I had the dock standards up on the screen, and I thought everybody could see that. I guess that's not important. As I was saying, the applicants have maintained a commendable buffer that was required as a result of a prior zoning board determination. I realize Member Savary's site photos are in January. This is from last spring. This is landward of the bluff crest. This is Little Blue Stem. It's very well vegetated from here down the face of the bluff. Every time I have been to the property, this is planted. I do want to point out that this could be replanted if it needed to be disturbed. I also want to show you what the shoreline to the north looks like in the summer, without ice shear, without the winter. This is the northern end of the subject property now. This is about the northern corner of the bulkhead, and you can see the neighboring property to the north, which is also owned by the applicant. You can see, a nice little salt marsh fringe here. And a little bit later, I think it's a legitimate question to, or an issue to raise, covenanting against the bulkhead on a property that has a salt marsh in front of it and where the house is set back about 75 feet, maybe more, from the shoreline, isn't really giving up much. There's also no information to show that the property to the north can meet the dock standards. So again, the covenant to not to give up the right to ask for something that might not meet the code parameters in the first place, where it hasn't been established if they can meet the code parameters, really isn't much mitigation. I do want to get to the survey because I think it's important, and looking for something that Rick mentioned in his presentation. So this is the survey that was used. This is where the dock is proposed. As both Rick and Brant had mentioned, the 3-foot contour line is about here. This is highlighted on my survey. This wasn't done by the surveyor. This was done by me. I don't want to give any false representation. The dock extends beyond that 3-foot line nominally in the location where it's been proposed in front of the stairs. But that 3-foot contour line is almost half the distance from the bulkhead in the middle portion of the property. And not only that, not only is that 3-foot depth here, but offshore immediately in this area, it's deeper. You're actually getting to deeper water in a shorter distance. And that's kind of the opposite of what Brant was saying before. You know, when those contour lines get closer together, you're having a steeper drop off. You get to deeper water in a shorter distance. The one thing that Brant said that I agree with is that the deeper the water, the less likely you are to have prop scour, which disrupts the bottom and is collateral damage from the presence of a dock in shallow water. The fact that the stairs are here, again, I don't see how this satisfies the standards of the dock regulation. There really aren't caveats for that 80-foot, where that minimum length necessary to get to the 3-foot depth. You have a 3-foot depth in about half the distance. And I think it's reasonable, and the planning department would respectfully offer that this dock as proposed does not meet the special permit standards and requires at least one variance from the standards of this section of the code, which is designed to, as I mentioned, limit docks both in the general locations where they can be authorized and the minimum size to accomplish safe access to the water. I think it's important to point out that dock components have improved over the years. There are things like the through flow fiberglass decking, which does allow light penetration. It's not accurate to say that there's no shading, though. That's an exaggeration. And untreated pilings certainly have less of an impact than back in the CCA days. CCA is still allowed, by the way, in DEC dock permits. So the extensive environmental review that Brant referenced in his presentation, there really isn't a lot of evidence that there's a deep dive in the environmental issues here from at least some of the other permitting agencies. But I hope we can all agree that even though that docks have improved over the years, to say that there's no impact from either the construction or a presence of a dock is inaccurate. Most pilings are pressure jetted in, that disturbs the water. The applicant has indicated that the pilings are not going to be jetted in, but they haven't said how they are going to be installed. I don't know how you get a piling in the water if you're not pressure jetting them. Are you driving them with a pile driver or a vibrating hammer? I don't think you'd use in marine waters. That's going to be just as much turbidity. Generally, you use pressure jets inside a turbidity curtain to at least minimize the damage. But any place you install a piling, it's not uncommon for those areas to require years to recover. Docks do alter the circulation of the water around them. The larger the dock and the more pilings you are, the greater that alteration is. So I don't want to necessarily exaggerate the impact from this one dock, but these impacts are cumulative. And the larger the docks and the more that you have, the greater that impact is. The pilings and the dock itself do create a foreign substrate. It's just not a natural presence of it in marine waters. We accept docks as a part of our maritime culture, and we accept the impacts that result from them under certain circumstances. But we shouldn't we shouldn't delude ourselves into thinking that they are completely benign, harmless, and have no impact at all. That's just factually inaccurate.
Is Brian done? This is Richard Whalen. I would like to provide a rebuttal here.
I'm sorry, Rick. I need a few more minutes, please. Rick had mentioned a shoal to the south, and I'm going to leave the survey up, and I'd like to give Rick an opportunity to address that. I was looking at the survey during both his and Brant's presentation. I don't see it. What I see is a steep drop off to the 3-foot contour line, and then deeper water right offshore in the area that I'm talking about. There was some reference to the disturbance that would be that would result from relocating the stairs. This bluff is bulkheaded. It has been landscaped, or maybe more accurately, credit to the applicants, revegetated. It needs to further be revegetated. The bulkhead was reconstructed pursuant to a natural resources special permit and presumably all other required permits. Some of that needs to get replanted. There's not a lot of disturbance from relocating a set of stairs. And I hope we can agree that as important as the bluff is, the greater emphasis should be on the protection of 3 Mile Harbor. Again, the quicker you get to those deeper depths, the less disturbance there is from either the bottom of the boat under unusual tides or propeller scour from the movement of the vessel. This is a New York State significant habitat, and this is an area that is actively seeded by the town's shellfish hatchery. So while it's commendable that the applicants are participating in the oyster grow out program, and they're financially going to contribute to the shellfish hatchery and further seeding, I hope we can all agree that a protection of our native shellfish habitat is a greater conservation concern and a greater conservation priority for the natural resource special permit standards, as well as, really for the natural resources special permit standard. It's better to protect shellfish habitat where it exists than to financially contribute to the program or to artificially add oyster spat by hanging it off the catwalk. I do want to point out that I presume that the construction protocol will be similar to the construction of the bulkhead. Access from the upland is fairly restricted, so it seemed to work for the bulkhead. But you do need to have a protocol for any dock that's going to be considered. A couple of things in the presentation that I think I have to rebut. I hope we can agree that birds using the catwalk to crack mollusks is not a natural resource special permit parameter, and that really shouldn't be taken seriously as a benefit that the dock is going to provide. It's also grossly overstated to say that a fixed catwalk over the surface of 3 Mile Harbor is not an impediment or a foreign object for the foraging of waterfowl or wading birds. The impact on waterfowl and wading birds may not be significant here, but to suggest it's non-existent is an overstatement, as well as the suggestion that there's not going to be any shading at all from the dock. I do think that there really hasn't been any establishment that covenanting on the adjoining property to the north is that they're giving up something they have a right to anyway. The circumstances that would warrant bulkheading that property are so far from the existing circumstances that it's hard to take that seriously. And we've seen some of the constraints in locating a dock on this property. It's hard to imagine a property to the north that does have a salt marsh fringe being able to easily locate a dock that's going to meet these special permit standards. Maybe that's the case, but we haven't really seen any evidence of that. I will point out, Rick is correct. This has been approved by the trustees, and if you follow the paper at all, the East Hampton Star characterized that vote as contentious and the first vote of its kind in a very long time. The trustees are not bound by the special permit standards that are in the code. The zoning board is, but this was discussed multiple times by the trustees before it actually did come up from a vote. This environmental review that I prepared was completed last May, and the whole application has been waiting for action from the trustees before it advanced. Lastly, I'm just going to add that the suggestion that the production of oyster spat is superior to seeding this area naturally by shellfish, I'm going to ask the board to reject that as poorly founded. Beyond that, I'd like to make myself available for any questions that any of the members may have. And if not, then I'll happily give Rick an opportunity to address these comments. Rick's comments and Brant's report really came in very recently, and had they been in the file at the time of the assessment, I would have tried to address as much of this within that EAF as possible.
Thank you, Brian. Any questions, board members, for Brian?
Well, how significant is the survey that we're looking at, an older survey, and they said they had a newer one?
I'm sorry, I'm a little bit, I apologize. I went through my file when Rick had mentioned something from February 21st. Yeah. I don't know what that revision consists of. I know that this dock plan and this bathymetry is shown on the DEC permit, which was issued really, probably inappropriately earlier than the natural resources special permit. Not a lot of coordination among the permitting agencies, which is, a detriment to everybody involved. Everybody kind of looking at this in a vacuum. So I don't know what changed on the survey. I doubt that any of the details relating to the dock or the bathymetry have. And again, if I've misspoken, then, I welcome Rick's correction.
Thank you. All right, Rick, I think we'll turn it over to you to close this out, to wrap it up on your end.
Okay, I'm going to be as concise as I can, but Brian covered a lot of ground there. And some of what he said is accurate, some of it isn't. So let's see what I can remember here.
All right, again,
starting point, I think the most.
I just want to say, in the effort of time too, let's just kind of keep this, because we do have time.
I try to be as concise as I can, and I'm not going to waste anyone's time here. I think the most important thing, first of all, is the underwater bathymetry, whatever. And the survey that Brian has up there is matching what I'm showing on my most recent survey. I can't know on the screen, on the TV screen, I assume this is true for you as well. You guys can't zoom in enough to see the actual soundings, but that does appear to match what's on our survey. So I think you'd have to look at our survey. Very, very simple. All right. If you go out dead center from the center of the property, dead center, you hit a shoal that goes down to 2.6 feet. First of all, Brian is correct about the code, of course, that you have to hit, and you're allowed the minimum distance to reach 3 feet of water below at low water. If you go out straight ahead in front of the property, there's a shoal that's 3 feet and lower. And of course, there's a boat associated with any dock that's there. So you could put a dock out in the center of the property, and the end of the dock would be in 3 feet of water, but the boat beyond it would be in shallower water. So that doesn't work. If you go to the south end of the property, again, you have to look at the underwater bathymetry. There is another shoal that goes down to just about 3 feet of water, just about at low tide. The place on the property where you most quickly reach deeper water is at the northerly end. Now, I'm going to say, I'll admit, if I look at the survey closely, and I can see that the end of the dock has gone a little bit, I'll say maybe 10 feet beyond the 3 foot low water mark. And if the board were to say, you know, that's not the minimum distance. You could go 70 feet and you'd be at 3 feet of water. And you told us to shorten the dock by 10 feet, and we'd be at the 3 foot, low water mark. We'd be okay with that. I'm sure we're not going to complain. That's probably true. Maybe it could be 10 feet shorter. But you have to look at the underwater topography to understand what I'm saying. And the only way to do that is you're going to have to pull out your surveys. And if you do that, the most obvious, best place to put the dock is at the northern end. It also happens that that's where the stay array is right now. Let me hit a couple of the other points. First of all, historically, Brian's right. In fact, he really kind of underrated things. In 1987, by 1987, the trustees had banned docks in any of their waters except the easterly shore of Three Mile Harbor. To the best of our knowledge, and obviously this came up with the trustees, no one has proposed a dock on the east side, a residential dock on the east side of Three Mile Harbor since then. We're the first one. It's very, very hard to do. The trustees did approve our dock, and as I believe they did it by more than a simple majority, but they discussed the hell out of it. They were fully aware of believe me, there were trustee members who were bringing up the natural resources special permit standards. Yes, they're not bound by them, but the trustees knew they existed and they were trying to apply them. They were very interested in our offer. I think they may have been the ones who initiated it, the offer to ban a dock on the northerly lot. We didn't closely evaluate that northerly property. Brian says it's fringed with salt marsh. I look at an aerial photograph, I'm seeing what appears to be mostly sand beach. But we didn't really look at it just as we didn't do, underwater topography in front of that land. So for Brian to characterize whether that covenant is meaningful or not, he has no more information than we do. All right? If you don't like the covenant, fine. But I'm not so sure that it's worthless. A couple of other things. Brian at one point stated that we said there would be no shading from the dock. That's not true. I said it would be minimal. We did not say there'd be no shading associated with the dock. And in terms of shellfishing, Brian, you need to go and read the reports by the town aquaculture department. Most of the oysters that are harvested in this town are placed there artificially. They're not coming from natural sets. Most of the oysters gotten in East Hampton town are the product of the town aquaculture department. So don't denigrate the idea of the oyster seeding program or the oyster grow-out program, which we're contributing to. It's where most of the oysters in East Hampton are coming from. Our impact on shellfishing is minimal. The dock does not occupy very much space at all. As I indicated, you probably could shorten the dock by 10 feet or so. We've been at this obviously for 4 years. We come to you last. That's the way the process works. The trustees have the greatest interest in what happens here. They own the underwater land. They approved the project and they looked at all the same stuff that you're looking at. We would ask that you show the same, I think that we meet the standards. We've already gone through the special permit standards. I think the basic important stuff, we do comply with it. I think this is the most logical place for the dock if you look at it from the point of view of maneuvering a water, a boat. And I think we meet the standards. So if you concluded that we could have a slightly shorter dock to reach 3 feet of water at low tide, and you said that's what we have to do to meet the special permit standards, fine. But I think all the other special permit standards, in terms of effect on public water, use of the waters, environmental, we comply with them. And I think we've demonstrated that. And I think some of this I realize that Brian got, the report by Brant relatively late, but some of Brian's comments indicate he did not read that report and did not read it fully. So some of the answers to some of the questions are in Brant Reiner's report. Those are my comments. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Rick. All right. I think it's time I think we can close this out.
We do have, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, we do have one person on the phone line.
Yes. Again, it's getting late. So, okay. Yes. Do we have anybody in the public?
Yes, let me unmute them now. Last four digits, 8880.
Caller 8880,
Hello,
are
can you
you
hear
on
me?
the line? Yes.
I am on the
Can
board. Can you
you,
hear me?
yes, can you state your name and address?
Yeah, this is John McGinn, and I am the applicant at
Yeah,
275
John.
Green Harbor Road.
Okay, if you're not attorney, I will have to swear you in.
Yes, sir.
Do you swear or affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Okay, go ahead.
I just want to first thank the board for your work as public servants and also for the consideration of our application. We purchased the property from memory about 14, 15 years ago, maybe less than that. We've tried to be very good stewards of the property and of the history of the property. It's one of the oldest houses on the harbor. It was built in 1910, we believe, and during Prohibition was owned by a colorful gentleman named Bud King. We do view ourselves as stewards of both the land and the harbor, and we've tried to make numerous improvements on the property to make it more environmentally friendly, to improve the water quality in whatever small way we can. I appreciate Mr. Frank acknowledging the bluff re-veg that we've maintained as we've been required to. We've also done a comprehensive re-landscaping plan to introduce eastern Long Island native plants throughout the property. In fact, pulling up invasives wherever possible, even in the wooded parcels. We've put in a permeable driveway material wherever possible. And on the 279 property adjacent, again, we view that as a serious mitigant to not pursue bulkheading or a dock. We wouldn't have done that ourselves ever because we understand that there are environmental considerations there. But in order to prevent future owners from being able to pursue that, we thought that was a real important thing to do. We're also planning at 279 to increase the buffer of native planting to increase the amount of filtration that happens. There's a natural swale that happens there, and we want to make sure that there's as much filtration of runoff before it hits the harbor waters. And we're also going to pull up a bluestone crushed driveway that's over there that also is environmentally problematic. Again, we do view ourselves as stewards of both the land and the harbor. And the reason why the dock is in the location is that there is that historic staircase that's there. It's probably been there since Prohibition. Not that exact structure, but it's been replaced over time. It's by far the shallowest part of the bluff. As you move closer to the center of the property, it's a very, very steep bluff. I mean, it's probably at least 45 degrees. And then if you didn't put the stair there, but kept it where it was, and then you'd have to build something on top of the native planting we're planning on doing on the bulkhead. So I won't go on and on. I know it's very late, and I do just want to again really express my deep gratitude as someone who loves East Hampton and its natural treasures, to all of the work you guys do, and to really express my sincere gratitude for your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McGinn. All right, Denise, would you like to close
Mr.
us out?
Chairman?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman?
Yep.
There was one thing that I didn't address in responding. I wanted to talk about the reasonable alternatives issue. Is that something I can just speak to in a minute?
Okay, be quick, please.
All right. Brian pointed out that the code provision 255-5-51 requires the zoning board to consider all reasonable alternatives. And basically what he suggested, remember, the only places in the town of East Hampton you can put a residential dock right now are the east shore of Plum Harbor, if you get trustee approval, good luck, and on private underwater land in Lake Montauk. And I suppose in theory maybe in Fort Pond, if you get permission from the owner of Fort Pond, which is the town. So there are very few places you can do this. you can't read the provision in the code that says no reasonable alternative means that you can always use a boat and pulley or a free swinging mooring. In fact, we have an actual physical problem at our property. And I wanted to point this out. And that is that we have a bulkhead. And in high water, the water comes a couple feet up the bulkhead. So it's not so easy to get a dinghy into the water that you can then paddle off and go to our mooring. So I would argue that apart from the fact the applicants do, as a matter of fact, have 2 small children, they do have a physical impediment to using the alternatives. And I think when you take that into account, the dock is the only reasonable alternative for boating access on the property. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, now Denise, you good?
In the matter of the application of Carrie Davis and John McGann, 275 3 Mile Harbor, Hog Creek Highway, Springs, tax map number 375-132.2. I make a motion to close the public hearing and leave the record open for 2 weeks after the transcript has been posted to the East Hampton Town website.
I will second that.
I'll concur.
Thank you all very much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
I concur as well.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda is the draft minutes, the approval of the minutes.
Yeah, they
Terry?
need a slight change. Can we table this to next
Okay,
week?
we'll table that, sure. We do have resolution. I believe we're going to table 2 of these resolutions until next week. Is that right, Terry? I think we have Elgert. We're gonna for a couple of corrections, and the other one would be Gregory. Is that it?
Elgert, yes, because I know that the last revision came out pretty late. I didn't get a chance to review it. So yeah, we could table that.
Okay.
We're not in danger of our 62-day limit, right? Yeah.
You might be. Hold on.
Well, yeah, let's check that. I'm trying to see when the PC went down.
For Elgard, you had a hearing on the 19th of October. Your record closed on 12/6. Your determination is due today.
It is due today. Okay. Did anybody see the last iteration of it?
The last iteration was that I distributed around just before 4 p.m. Just to include in the conditions that in addition to the bluestone patio being removed, that the existing deck and shower that are not allowed be removed as well before any building permit is issued. That's the only change.
That was the only change? Okay, I'm good with everything before that.
I read that too, and I'm good with that as well.
Yeah. In fact, thank you, Terry, again, for finding that point in the public record where the board had discussed that on the record so that we could incorporate it into the conditions.
Okay.
Okay, so what we have is Sylvan Realty. Tim, you want to take that one?
Chairman, I'm trying to pull it up right now. So the board will recall that this was the property on 3 Mile Harbor and the request to add a second story onto the existing structure, which would consist of an office, 2 apartments, and a deck on the back, as well as a variance for the parking lot. And this was all proposed in return for a change that would ultimately mean that the applicant would no longer be able to have a nightclub use or a restaurant use or a 24/7 use. And we were unanimous in our approvals of the parking lot variance, as well as the 2 apartments and the variances required there. And a majority of the board, however, voted to deny the variance of the deck in the back. So in the matter of Sylvan Realty LLC.
Can I I'm sorry, can I interrupt you? I wanted to let you know I had approved that decking, but I had second thoughts on it and notified Jennifer that I am now denying it. I think I thought I was approving the apartments twice or something, denying it, right? Approving.
And we've made,
Right.
and we've made that
So
correction.
now it is unanimous.
That is correct on there.
Yeah.
Okay, I appreciate that clarification. Thank you. So we all were in unison in approving the first two variances and denying the third. So in the matter of Sylvan Realty LLC at 44 3 Mile Harbor Road in East Hampton, Suffolk County, tax map 300-161-4-9, I make a motion to accept the determination as written.
I'll second that.
I'll concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. Terry, you want to take Harvey Elgert?
Yeah, for the resolution of Harvey Elgart, it's 60 and 64 South Elroy Drive. Is that correct? I don't see the address on there. Tax map 300-048-02-11. This was a unanimous resolution by the board to deny all components of it except for the repair of the foundation. And so in the matter of Harvey Elgart, tax map 300-048-02-11, I make a motion to approve the resolution as written.
I second.
I concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. Michael Grunberg, I think, Tim, that was yours as well. You want to take that?
Yep, hang on, I'm pulling it up. So the board will recall that this was with regard to a variance that related to the installation of solar panels and would require a variance of 7.6 feet above the maximum allowable height. The board was unanimous in their approval of this application. So in the matter of Michael Grunberg at 39 Green Hollow Road in East Hampton, Suffolk County tax map 300-193-2-7.6, I make a motion to accept the resolution as written.
I'll second that.
I concur. Thank you. Gregory, Nicholas Gregory, Terry, I think that was yours.
No, that's also me, Mr. Chair.
Oh, go for it.
And that was with regard to a home that required an NRSP in a very delicate duneland area to construct improvements, but also included an upgraded sanitary system and a complete revegetation of the property, as well as a duneland restoration project. And in the end, the board was unanimous in their approval of this NRSP application. So in the matter of Nicholas Gregory at 15 Shore Road in Amagansett, Suffolk County tax map 300-131-6-16, I make a motion to approve the determination as written.
Second.
I concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. All right, I think that takes us to the end, and board members, I think we're going to need a motion to go into executive session. Well, so in other words, Vice Chair, if you can make that motion, you could make a motion to end the public hearing for the evening. And we at the same time make a motion to go into executive session for the purpose of current or pending litigation.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to make a motion to close the public hearing for the Town of East Hampton ZBA Zoning Board of Appeals for January 25th, 2022 at 10:03 p.m. And I'd like to make a second motion that we go into executive session for the purpose of discussing pending litigation.
Second.
Both? No, those two separate ones or one?
All right.
Okay, I'll concur on both.
I concur.
I concur as well. Thank you. And Matt, I'll wait till you sign off and turn it over to me.
Okay.